Chapter 521. The Stand Against Oblivion 1. It was almost ironic how the tide turned so violently. Without warning, the Empire's side suffered a catastrophe. One so unique and devastating, it could only be compared to a disaster of Fry Starlight's caliber. The Empire's main camp, meant to be the safest place in the entire army, had become an inferno. A hell of black flames devoured everything in its path. The fire spared no one. Humans burned one after the other, and escape was futile. The flames chased them down to the very end. At the heart of that hell, there were only two sounds: the roar of fire and the endless screams. From the depths of the black inferno, the monster responsible for this disaster emerged. V's eyes looked strange. Holding two legendary swords, he felt his consciousness slipping. Huh? Why am I attacking the Empire? He stared at the people in front of him, then at the swords in his hands. What are these blades? Where's Balerion? Where's the Dark Sister? His blackened eyes flaring, V stumbled, throwing his swords aside and clutching his head. His posture, his facial expressions, his movements, everything about him was no longer him. This wasn't mere mimicry. V hadn't just copied someone's abilities. He had copied their being, their essence, their personality, their habits, everything. That was why he was panicking now. He had become Fry Starlight, and Fry Starlight would never attack the Empire. What the hell did I do? I wasn't supposed to kill Imperial soldiers. I'm supposed to kill the Ultras. V screamed, trying to catch his breath within the blazing hellscape of dark flames surrounding him. Imperial soldiers continued dying, one after another, their dying cries grating on his ears. Shut up already! Damn you! With a wave of his hand, he unleashed a torrent of surging energy, obliterating all the burned corpses around him. His head felt like it was going to explode, like someone was smashing his skull with a hammer. V was experiencing an existential breakdown. Two selves were clashing inside him. And when the agony reached its peak, with a scream that shook the heavens, V collapsed to the ground, blood bursting from his eyes, nose, and mouth. His muscles seized violently, his veins threatening to burst. As he screamed in pain, he felt the gates of hell opening inside him. Until now, V had only mimicked simple moves, actions he'd seen others perform. But this time, the mimicry extended far beyond that. He had embodied another person entirely. Fry Starlight, a monster in a godlike body, overflowing with immeasurable power and unthinkable abilities. Sure, V had succeeded in copying him, but his body wasn't built to handle that level of power for long. And now, he had hit his limit. His body began to reject the transformation, forcibly ejecting him from the form of Fry Starlight. Writhing in agony, V finally started to return to himself. At that very moment, an old man suddenly appeared, striking the back of his head with a swift blow. So that's what Linman meant. Truly, a terrifying power. It was Murgo, the Lord of the Dark Hive, who had teleported straight to the battlefield to observe the result. Staring at V's spasming, unconscious body, Murgo narrowed his eyes. 7 minutes and 42 seconds. That's how long he maintained Fry Starlight's form, and yet, just that short time left him in this state. Hoisting V's broken body over his shoulder, Murgo prepared to retreat, though not before casting one final glance at the inferno around him. What a terrifying ability! I wonder what its true limits are. What if V could copy without limit, mimicking the powerful, wielding their strength as his own? What are the conditions? What are the boundaries? All it took for him to copy Fry Starlight was to see him once with his own eyes. If that's true, then didn't V just demonstrate a potential that defies all reason? Murgo chuckled in awe, contemplating the monster now resting in his arms. The peak of the Ultras. It really is a title that suits you. And with that, Murgo vanished with V, leaving the battlefield behind. What remained was a graveyard, a true catastrophe for the Empire's side. In a single day, they lost 20,000 soldiers. Many of their elite fighters were gone. It seemed the Ultras had finally started to rise again, after suffering a humiliating defeat in the first round of the war. Under the wing of night, within the blackened blaze, the massacre ended in a crushing defeat for Frey's side. Far from the carnage, one man crawled away by some miracle, leaving a long trail of blood behind him. An old warrior, his flame flickering, left in a truly pitiful state. Panting hard, Iris Sunlight collapsed to the ground, slamming his fist against the dirt. Damn it! Iris looked like a completely different person. Half of his body was charred, and a deep gash split his chest open, stretching across his face, where his right eye had been lost. To take nameless judgment at point-blank range was a one-way ticket to hell. He survived only by channeling all his power into defense at the very last moment. Even then, despite giving it everything he had, he ended up like this. The difference in power was staggering. So this is what it means to fight against Frey Starlight. If V could replicate Frey's power without limit, then what awaited them was the arrival of a true catastrophe. It would take the intervention of the highest commanders to deal with this, or send Frey Starlight himself to stop it. This was a real catastrophe. Trying to soothe his wounds and ignore the overwhelming pain tearing through him, Iris crawled away, slumping in defeat against a relatively large rock. It could be said that the Lord of House Sunlight had reached a pitiful state unlike anything he had ever experienced in his life. Perhaps I should have just died back there and used myself as a shield to protect the claymore bearer. At the time, it seemed like the better choice. Melina was still young, with far greater potential. Unlike him, an old man at his peak. But in the final moment, he hesitated. Instead of protecting her, he shielded himself and let her die. In the end, he couldn't make that sacrifice. And that's what made him curse himself over and over again. Chapter 522. The Stand Against Oblivion 2. With a face twisted in pain and clenched teeth, Iris muttered bitterly, "I'm truly afraid of dying." He had always believed he wouldn't hesitate when the time came. He had lived long enough, and it wouldn't be so bad to throw his life away for those younger than him. But in that final moment, he didn't think like a great lord or a commander. He simply thought like a human being, a human who feared death. "I'm sorry," Iris apologized to the empty air before him. The pain made him hallucinate, seeing faces that no longer existed. Felt like he was about to lose himself completely. And just as the madness was about to consume him, the only device that survived within his burned clothing lit up. It let out a mechanical beep and flashed with a red light. Iris hastily pulled it out, gazing at it with tear-filled eyes. A few seconds later, he pressed the single button and answered the call. Before him, a holographic figure appeared. A familiar young man. "Your Highness," Iris muttered hesitantly, staring at Aegon Valyrian standing before him. "You're in miserable shape, Lord Iris. It seems things are even worse than I imagined," said the prince with a face that showed mild disappointment. He was fully armored. Something odd, given that he was supposed to be on the other side of the world, but Iris wasn't in the mental state to notice that. With his one remaining eye, he glared at the prince in front of him. "Aegon, nearly 10,000 of our soldiers were just wiped out, and we've lost the claymore bearer," Iris lamented. Aegon simply nodded with indifference. "Yes, quite disappointing," he said, then paused, which only fueled Iris's anger. "Disappointing? We were annihilated," Iris roared, unable to contain himself. Aegon chuckled coldly. "Annihilated by one man, and you couldn't even touch him. That's a disgrace. You've brought great shame upon us, Lord Iris." Iris froze, struggling to process what he'd just heard. How did you know we only faced one man?" he asked in disbelief. "How? What a foolish question, Lord Iris Sunlight. I monitor the battlefield constantly. I have eyes everywhere. The moment you came under attack, I was informed of everything. Yes, your opponent was strong, but I assumed you'd handle him. After all, you outnumbered him greatly. But in the end, you failed. As I said, you brought shame upon us. Iris found himself speechless. Before this prince who clearly didn't care. Not for his life, and not for the 20,000 soldiers who had just died under his command. He wanted to argue, but his shattered state, his exhaustion, and his pain all made him lower his head and speak in a faint tone. The enemy possesses abilities similar to Fry Starlight's. His power level is extremely high. I believe he ranks within SS Plus tier. We'll need the Emperor himself or someone equal to deal with him. Iris spoke, while Aegon simply sighed. Just hold out with what you have for now. You have the real Fry Starlight among you, don't you? But Iris tried to object, but Aegon cut him off. No need to worry. You and I are now standing on the same land. What are you talking about? Iris asked in confusion, as the prince rolled his eyes toward the vast land around him. In front of him, an entire city had been burned to the ground, its inhabitants slaughtered, while the imperial forces under his command marched forward, destroying everything in their path. It was the 5th city he had conquered in a single day. While you were distracting the enemy from the front, I thought this would be the perfect opportunity to knock on their back door. After all, it wouldn't be fair for you to hog all the fun. It was a simple plan, a stupid plan, so reckless and insane that only a child would dare think of it. But Prince Aegon actually carried it out. After Fry Starlight had conquered the Eastern Nightmare lands, the Empire and its forces marched across that cursed terrain, then simply sailed through, reaching the opposite side of the Ultra's continent. Preparing and executing the plan had taken a long time, and it had been done in such absolute secrecy that even Iris hadn't heard a word of it. Then, just 24 hours ago, they landed on the western shore of the Ultra's continent and began their extermination campaign. Beside Aegon stood 30,000 soldiers, a relatively decent number. But what truly gave their force power was the names marching with them. The entire Valyrian family had joined the campaign, with Emperor Mikar Valyrian and Ser alone leading the charge. Their mere presence made the imperial force a terrifying engine of war. This army was now marching from the west, taking the enemy completely by surprise. From both the east and the west, war had been declared upon the Ultras. Taking in the madness of the situation, Iris Sunlight cursed under his breath. This is absolute madness. Are you seriously trying to pull off an anvil and hammer maneuver on an entire continent? It was a known battlefield tactic, pinning the enemy between a fortified frontal force, the anvil, and a devastating assault from the rear, the hammer. But that tactic was meant for battlefields, not an entire continent. And yet Aegon spoke of it with a childlike simplicity, as if such a plan made perfect sense. It was lunacy. It was doomed. And still, Aegon smiled cheerfully at Iris's outburst. Yes, that's exactly what I'm trying to do. So hang in there until we arrive, will you? Upon hearing that response, cold sweat slid down Iris's neck. You're insane. Ha. I don't want to hear that from an old man who couldn't even handle a single young man. Aegon laughed, waving mockingly at Iris. Anyway, I'm counting on you to hold out, especially Fry Starlight. Tell him I really do love him. The prince laughed again before cutting the call. Encircling an entire continent. Leaning back, he tossed the communication gem aside and stared up at the sky. It's like we're playing some kind of twisted game, not fighting a war that could cost millions of lives. This world really is full of lunatics. Chapter 523. The Stand Against Oblivion 3. The game continued. A new chapter began. After the Empire's victory in the first round, the Ultras struck back with a vengeance. The complete annihilation of their forces at the rear shattered the morale of the Imperial troops, who now realized there was no longer a safe place to retreat. Then, without warning, one Imperial unit after another came under assault, attacked by elite Ultras forces. And that wasn't all. The battlefield witnessed, for the first time, the arrival of the Lords of the Nightmare, creatures far beyond the SS tier. On the Empire's right flank, the Abyss Watchers unleashed absolute chaos, slaughtering soldiers in droves. On the left, they released the mindless Hollow, Pontiff Sulivan, accompanied by hundreds of nightmare creatures that attacked with relentless fury, aiming to wipe out the Empire's forces entirely. The battlefield plunged into complete disarray. The Empire's advantage was slowly crumbling. In response, many of their forces began grouping together, uniting to hold the line against this overwhelming threat. There was no turning back now. Life and death battles erupted daily, and with each clash, hundreds fell. Chaos had become the name of this war. On one side, the bulk of the Imperial army was surrounded and suppressed by the Ultras. On the other side, Prince Aegon and his forces advanced rapidly, burning every city in their path. The Ultras' reaction to Aegon's maneuver came too late, and with the full might of House Valyrian supporting him, there was little they could do to stop it. Losses piled up on both sides, and no one could say for sure who held the upper hand anymore. This was no longer a war of strategy or intelligence. It had devolved into blind slaughter and utter chaos. Both sides were now locked in a war of total annihilation. But none suffered more than the vanguard. That meant Snow Lionheart and Fry Starlight. For several days, their squad was forced to fight without rest. Yet, unlike other units that regrouped and retreated, they stood strong, holding the front line. They had no choice but to face off against dozens of nightmare beasts beyond the SS tier. Fry and Snow endured immense hardship just to contain the disasters before them. Both of them led from the front, drenched in blood from head to toe. The number of enemies they'd already slain was uncountable, and still more kept coming. I just want to know, how the hell did the Ultras manage to control these things? Snow growled, gripping Vermithor, whose healing aura continually replenished his strength. Beside him, Fry decapitated another abomination, wiping blood from his face. That's what I've been trying to figure out these past few days, he said. And I think I finally found a clue. Seriously? Snow shouted back, cutting through more nightmare creatures as they fought back to back. The battlefield echoed with the sounds of shrieking monsters, grinding limbs, and destruction. The noise was so overwhelming that they had to scream just to hear each other. In particular, Sansa Valyrian had unleashed utter mayhem after flooding the battlefield with her spreading shadow. Dozens of tendrils of darkness slithered across the ground, each ending in massive mouths that resembled worms, devouring everything in their path. Though Sansa had already slain many, Frey's eyes kept scanning the battlefield, again and again. They're well hidden, strange markings carved into the skins of all the nightmare creatures. They may look like meaningless runes, but there's a faint stream of aura flowing through them, so faint you can't sense it at all. Fry said as he turned another nightmare beast into shredded remains. But they can't escape my senses. I'm almost certain it's the witch's doing. Frey's tone was firm, and Snow's expression darkened. Beatrice. Somehow, she had managed to bring every single nightmare creature under her control in a shockingly short time. All of it, through that strange, logic-defying magic of hers. To be honest, we're in terrible shape. We need to deal with them quickly and retreat. They say a monster resembling you showed up at the rear and completely wiped it out, Snow said, referencing the recent report they had received. The description matched that of V, the masked one they'd clashed with several times before. But the power he reportedly displayed, it was something else entirely. A monster capable of mimicking Fry Starlight. We'll deal with him when the time comes. For now, focus on the enemy in front of you. Fry showed no reaction to the news about V, making it clear that worrying over a fight bound to happen anyway was pointless. His logic was simple and effective. This was war. They'd face him sooner or later, and when that moment came, Fry would kill him. Right now, he prioritized the enemy before him. Sir, another wave of beasts is coming. As the two of them fought, a soldier rushed in to report. A new wave is incoming, and it's bigger than the last. They were already worn out from the brutal, relentless combat, and now another wave. The soldiers had reached their limits. Exhaustion had taken its toll. But the battle was far from over. Another offensive was heading their way, and it was anything but ordinary. Fry Starlight was the first to sense it, thanks to his enhanced perception. He felt it clearly, and his expression darkened. "Prepare yourselves. A disaster is about to descend upon us." His warning instantly put everyone on edge. Frey's words carried weight, especially now. Slowly, Ghost emerged from the shadows, having sensed the same thing. And then, within seconds, the fog came. A strange mist crept toward them, forming from nothing, like someone had tossed a giant smoke bomb over their heads. The stinging, choking fog sent panic through the ranks. "Mist Stalker?" Ghost asked, sharpening his senses to the limit. "No, that's not the Mist Stalker." Fry immediately denied it. He knew the Mist Ghoul better than anyone. "This is a different kind of beast, one far more lethal." His words did nothing but amplify the fear spreading among the troops. The battlefield had gone eerily quiet. All the creatures around them had vanished into the fog. The mist was so thick that it completely blocked their vision. None of them could see more than a few steps ahead. And to make matters worse, it didn't just rob them of sight. It numbed their senses too. The situation left the Imperial troops with no choice but to gather tightly into a single formation. Backs to each other, weapons drawn. Next to Fry and Snow, Dawn Polaris arrived with Selena, the witch who had been traveling with them. "This doesn't bode well. I can't expand my domain at all," Selena said, clearly disturbed by the way this magical mist worked. The tension kept building as silence dragged on. "Where will they come from?" Dawn looked around nervously, eyes scanning left and right. All the soldiers did the same, backs together, covering every direction. With their senses crippled, there was no way to pinpoint the source of the attack. And that uncertainty only deepened the fear. Seconds ticked by. Silence reigned. Then, Fry Starlight's shout pierced the tension like lightning. "From below!" He yelled the warning and instantly leapt into the air. But it was too late. Without warning, the ground beneath them ruptured, and from the depths of hell itself, death came roaring upward. Dozens, no, hundreds of gray, ghastly hands exploded from the abyss, surging toward them like a swarm. Everyone stood frozen in shock, staring at those elongated hands, each over 100 meters long. But it wasn't the sheer size or destructive force that terrified them. It was what happened upon contact. The moment the hands touched someone, a horrific phenomenon occurred, one that drove many to the brink of madness. Whoever these hands touched, their life was stolen, their skin decayed, their flesh shriveled. Only bone remained, and it all happened in seconds. Chapter 524. The Stand Against Oblivion 4. In the blink of an eye, dozens of Imperial soldiers and allies were turned into skeletons, right before their comrades' eyes. Panic erupted across the battlefield. Terror, screaming, death, and the true nightmare had only just begun. The hands slithered across the battlefield at terrifying speed, like serpents signaling an impending massacre. In mere seconds, hundreds had already been reduced to skeletons. But just before the situation could escalate further, they heard his voice. 10,000 steps of shadow, supreme art, abyssal wave. He was fast, so fast their eyes could only catch the trails of violet aura he left behind. Like a spinning buzzsaw, Fry shredded through the massive gray hands in mere moments, scattering their rotting black blood across the field. Stopping the attack that nearly annihilated them, Fry reappeared at the front with blinding speed. His blades pointed in a single direction. "Get a grip. The enemy is right ahead," he said, unleashing a colossal cleaving arc that tore through the fog. "Brace yourselves. We're facing one of the Nightmare Lords. The Cosmos." His strike blew away the mist, and he would soon wish it hadn't. The true form of the monster that had attacked them was finally revealed. A grotesque abomination, crawling out from the very depths of hell. It looked like a giant wraith, its skin ghastly white. From inside its body sprouted hundreds of colossal gray hands that carried it aloft. Its long black hair flowed like a waterfall, dragging across the ground. Its face was a living nightmare. Even the bravest of soldiers couldn't bear to look at it for more than a second. It was as if this creature was the embodiment of every curse imaginable, a hideous beast sculpted from mankind's deepest fears. And beside the cosmos, another presence could be seen, one exuding immense, suffocating power. Clad in a black suit, a massive scythe strapped across his back, that cursed man stood beside his mother. Many recognized him at once. The Hollow, Ludwig. Snow Lionheart whispered his name, clenching Vermithor tightly, ready to unleash the War King's form at a moment's notice. "This will be a tough one," he said, signaling the troops to follow him and Fry in subduing these monsters. But before they could even move forward, they froze, as their ears were shattered by a scream that tore the skies apart. A harrowing cry unlike anything they had ever heard. And at the same time, a quake struck the earth from out of nowhere, announcing the arrival of another nightmare. From afar, they saw her coming, taller than all the mountains surrounding them. A monster crawling on 8 limbs, a single eye on her head and a gaping mouth splitting open her chest. The Lady of 8 Legs, another nightmare lord. At the sight of her, despair overwhelmed the troops, so much that many collapsed on the spot, especially when yet another overwhelming aura descended upon them, suffocating their lungs. A fourth presence had arrived. From afar, they could all feel him approaching, a man carrying immeasurable power. "My lord," a soldier said, trembling, barely able to speak the words. "One of the enemy commanders has been spotted, the human demon Dragoth." The soldier burst into laughter, his legs finally giving out under the weight of fear. "This is insane," Snow muttered, his expression growing darker. The Cosmos, the Lady of 8 Legs, Dragoth, each of them, monsters of SS plus caliber, especially the last. Aside from Abraham Starlight, Dragoth had never lost a single battle in his life. Even at his worst, not even Sir Alan could kill him. And now, that man had arrived, alongside 2 Nightmare Lords and 1 Hollow. A full-scale disaster had befallen them. "Sir, we have to retreat. There's no other way. We'll be wiped out if we stay," a soldier cried out, pleading with Snow to give the order. "We need to run." Snow Lionheart, the commander, the one whose word determined whether they lived or died, the church's champion, staring down the monsters before him. He fully grasped the scale of the catastrophe. No matter how he looked at it, he reached only one conclusion. They would be annihilated. In a situation like this, there was only one option left. Retreat. If they wanted to survive, that was the only path. He was just about to give the order, but before he could, everyone on the battlefield froze in place. As an overwhelming pressure spread, pushing back the combined auras of the Nightmare Lords and Dragoth alike. It was a terrifying aura, one that wrapped around them and banished the enemy's power completely. The source was none other than the man who always stood at their front. With eyes burning bright in violet light, with a face carved for killing, Fry Starlight turned to them. "Retreat? Who's retreating? And where the hell would you run to?" Stepping forward, he declared, "The enemy is right in front of you, so why are you hesitating?" Gathering every ounce of his strength, Fry roared, "Wake up, for fuck's sake. This is war. We're standing on a battlefield, and our enemy is right here. How could we possibly show him our backs? You really think you'll survive if you run? Look at them. They're monsters. Monsters bred to hunt down humans like us. The moment you turn your backs on them, you're already dead." With his gaze returning to what stood before him, Fry Starlight declared, "I'd rather die a warrior fighting on his feet than be buried as a coward who fled." Fry took his first step forward, uncaring of what order Snow Lionheart might give. Beside him, his shadow thickened, and from it emerged Sansa, cloaked in a black aura. "Another suicidal move, huh? What if no one joins you?" Will you face them alone? She sighed, exasperated by the reckless lunatic she was stuck with. But he just chuckled. Of course not. I know you'll come with me. So, pointing toward the colossal creature in the distance, one so massive it blotted out the sky, I want you to handle that one. It was madness, a request so insane that Sansa blinked, glancing from the monster to Fry in disbelief. You really want me to fight that thing? The eight-legged lady was so immense that despite being dozens of kilometers away, her outline was crystal clear, and Fry wanted her to take it on alone. I trust you can handle it, and if anything goes wrong, I'll come save you. So don't worry, he said, turning his back to her and facing Snow and the others. I'll deal with their leader. Sansa will intercept the eight-legged lady. That leaves you with the cosmos and her cursed son. So what do you say, Snow? Will you join me once more? Or will you run with your tail between your legs? He stared him down, forcing the hero to make his choice. Snow met Frey's gaze, then glanced at the terrified soldiers behind him. He let out a long breath. If I turn back now, I'll never be able to catch up to you again. Fry. As golden runes crawled over his skin, Snow Lionheart stepped forward. Soldiers of the Empire, if you wish to flee, I won't stop you. I won't blame you. The enemy ahead knows no mercy. But because of that, we must stop them here and now. Otherwise, only death and defeat await us. Looking at the soldiers, at his comrades, Snow made his choice. We fight, he declared, resolute, and Fry responded with a nod and a grin. Behind Snow, Ghost remained with the rest of the troops, ready to offer support. Their enemies were monstrous, but Fry and Sansa had already committed to facing two of them alone. It was a gamble, a terrifying one, but it was the only choice they had. Some soldiers still hesitated, but Fry gave them no time to ponder. Good luck, he said, just before his feet slammed into the earth and launched him like a comet toward the battlefield he had chosen. Behind him, a pair of black wings unfurled from Sansa's back. She soared at supersonic speed toward the eight-legged lady. That towering monstrosity would spell doom if it reached the front lines. So the demon princess had no choice but to intercept it, no matter the cost. As for Snow and the others, they charged toward the cosmos and her cursed spawn, the hollow Ludwig. What awaited them now were brutal, hellish battles, fights that could decide the very outcome of the war. Focusing his sights on Dragoth, Fry finally saw the man who had once defeated by his father. A being at the peak of the SS Plus tier. A monster once called immortal. Knowing he was about to clash with such a foe, Fry couldn't suppress the twisted smile curling across his face. Gripping the nameless mask, he placed it over his face, hiding his expression as he tightened his hold on his twin swords. Like a violet meteor screaming across the sky, Fry shot forward, toward Dragoth the human demon. Chapter 525. Fry Starlight vs. Dragoth 1. The pace of events quickened, and a catastrophic clash was on the verge of erupting. In the east of the Ultras continent, in one of the lower Bloodlands, there stood an ancient city erased from the annals of history. Its name was Yharnam. Once a flourishing and advanced city, time had shown it no mercy, leaving behind nothing but ruins. Amidst the devastation and wreckage, a lone man sat waiting, beneath a dead tree that once served as his only shade. The human demon, Dragoth, contrary to his usual savage nature, appeared genuinely calm this time. He wore a long black cloak, a massive greatsword resting on his lap. His crimson eyes had been staring at the ruins for quite some time. The place was peaceful, with a soft breeze gently playing with his long black hair. The human demon stared for long at his birthplace. Destruction, rubble, and death. These were all that remained of this land. And when he'd finally had enough, he closed his eyes, letting the memories wash over him. He pondered deeply, but soon opened those eyes once more. For the old land of Yharnam hadn't welcomed just one person that day. It welcomed two. When Dragoth opened his eyes, he was already there. No sound, no pressure. He had simply appeared from nothing. a young man much younger than him wielding two dark swords. His face was hidden behind a strange mask that only revealed his dimly glowing dark eyes. At last, his awaited enemy had arrived. They stared at one another, neither making a move. The other battles had already begun. The distant thundering they heard confirmed that. But here, in Yharnam, neither side took a single step. "Looks like you've got something on your mind, son of Abraham." Dragoth was the first to break the silence. On the other side, Fry Starlight removed his mask, revealing a familiar smirk upon his face. "No, I'm just a bit surprised." Fry laughed for a moment, then pointed his sword at Dragoth. "Forgive me. I came here expecting to face the same mindless beast who didn't know left from right. But it seems you've regained your composure." Since the moment he launched himself toward this battlefield, Fry had been prepared to unleash everything from the start against Dragoth and crush him immediately. But his enemy caught him off guard, showing a self-control so unlike him. In fact, Dragoth hadn't even released the slightest killing intent toward him, which made Fry hesitate at the last moment, giving way to this unexpected dialogue. Looking around, Fry spoke again without moving from his spot. "If I'm not mistaken, this is the old city of Yharnam. Has returning to your birthplace after all these years calmed you down to the point you're suppressing your instincts?" Frey's final words carried many implications between their lines. Although Dragoth seemed calm, Fry could tell his state of mind. Dragoth was barely holding himself back, suppressing that monstrous bloodlust, especially when standing before the son of the man he hated most. Despite the boiling rage in his chest, the madness he could hardly contain, Dragoth held back and continued speaking instead of fighting. "Fry Starlight, I have 2 questions for you, no more. And that's all you'll hear from me," he said, raising 2 fingers. Fry tilted his head slightly, showing genuine curiosity about what the human demon wanted. "Let's hear it," Fry replied, willing to go along with Dragoth's flow for now. Dragoth scowled, then asked his first question. "Do you truly believe you have a chance of winning this war?" The human demon's first question was unexpected, making Fry instinctively frown. But Dragoth continued speaking before Fry could respond. "I've heard much about you, and I'm sure your eyes see far more than others do. We're nothing but facades in this war, pawns in a grand play directed by someone else. We have no power, no control against that person." Pointing to himself, Dragoth growled with visible rage. "Look at me. I was once called the greatest hero in Ultra's history. I did everything I could to resist whoever pulls the strings. I shattered my demon contract. I gave up my humanity. And what did I achieve? I lost to your father, but I didn't die. Instead, they dragged this body away and tortured me for years, driving me mad. Those very same people who now command you in this war. Whether it's me or Abraham Starlight, we were both just pawns. More lively than others, sure, but ultimately worthless before true power. Your father was immense. I'm certain he crossed the threshold. I've seen with my own eyes what he was capable of. Yet even with all that power, he died without changing anything. And as for me, I'm still alive only because they allowed me to live. You have many enemies, Fry Starlight, and there are still far fiercer monsters lying in wait. You've already clashed with some of them." Dragoth's last words made Fry narrow his eyes instinctively. He was referring to the higher-ranked demons who had recently come knocking on his door. "What's the point of fighting here, Fry Starlight? The current you're trying to resist is far too overwhelming. Mere humans can't stand against it." The point Dragoth raised was completely valid, but Fry didn't expect to hear it from him of all people. And yet Dragoth hadn't said anything new. He had simply reminded Fry of what he was already prepared to face, which is exactly why a violet aura enveloped Frey's body as he stepped forward, his eyes stabbing into his opponent. "You talk too much, human demon. Hurry up and ask your second question." Fry didn't need to answer with words. His current battle-ready state was more than enough to give Dragoth the answer he sought. Fry Starlight was prepared to fight this war to the very end. no matter what he had to face along the way. Standing firm, holding his greatsword in hand, finally, the scowl on Dragatha's face vanished, replaced by a monstrous smile that revealed his true thirst for blood. You truly fear no death, do you? Then allow me to ask you my final question. As his body surged with a dark aura of black lightning, crackling and rumbling like a vengeful storm, Dragoth revealed his true face. Do you truly believe that a whelp like you can defeat me? Exploding with pressure, his grin widened further, so wide it looked like it might tear his face apart. Fry responded with even greater pressure, his expression just as twisted, radiating that same sickening craving for bloodshed. Once more, no words were needed. Both Dragoth and Fry detonated the earth beneath them, launching themselves at each other with speed that defied logic. The ruins of old Yharnam were wiped out in an instant. The land cracked and shattered from the violent clash of two bloodthirsty monsters. Their auras collided, neither backing down, as they threw themselves into a raw contest of brute strength. Dragoth gained the upper hand, shoving Fry backward with terrifying speed, bulldozing through everything in their path with nothing but sheer force. He kept plowing through the ruins, smashing everything in sight with Frey's body, until they slammed into a massive mountain behind them. But Dragatha's physical strength was so overwhelming that he kept pushing, burying Fry deep into the mountain, carving a tunnel with his opponent's back. Lost in the darkness of the mountain's interior, Dragoth laughed maniacally, gripping his sword and unleashing a lightning-fast slash, cloaked in the explosive aura of black thunder. The strike created a devastating shockwave that split the base of the mountain in two with its sheer destructive power. But it didn't reach its mark. The mighty slash stopped halfway through, crashing into metal even tougher than stone. Fry Starlight had blocked the attack, halting Dragatha's greatsword, and in the blink of an eye, a blinding burst of violet light exploded in Dragatha's face. The glow consumed the entire mountain, and in less than a second, the upper half of the mountain, already split by Dragatha's attack, was shredded into hundreds of pieces as it was engulfed by thousands of dark slashes. Caught in the center of the massacre, Dragatha's body was marked with hundreds of deep, bloody wounds. His blood spilled in torrents. In less than a second, Fry Starlight had unleashed 1,000 strikes, tearing through the body Dragoth once took pride in. Face to face, Frey's glowing violet eyes met Dragatha's crimson ones again. But this time, one pair was filled with pain, while the other glowed like a starving beast ready to devour everything in its path. Chapter 526. Fry Starlight vs. Dragoth 2. Don't get the wrong idea, Dragoth. Boom! With a colossal slash that tore through the void itself, Fry sent his opponent flying, all the way back to the place where everything began, Yharnam. What you see before you is a monster of a different breed, one completely unlike Abraham Starlight. Teleporting instantly, Fry pursued him without hesitation. Make no mistake, unlike my father, I don't leave my enemies alive. Frey's swords moved at terrifying speed, feral and ruthless, ripping through Dragatha's flesh with unrelenting force. His thick killing intent poured out without end. Despite receiving those devastating blows, Dragoth didn't retreat. Not once. Instead, with a terrifying grin, he lunged forward and sank his teeth into Frey's neck, ripping out a large chunk of flesh as he laughed wildly. Really? A monster of a different kind? Then why does your blood taste exactly the same as any other human? Dragoth roared, his voice thundering like a storm, his wounds rapidly regenerating. Then, swinging his sword with brutal might, he unleashed a destructive beam of black lightning that swallowed Fry whole. Raging Raijin style, Ragnarok discharge, stabbing his blade into the ground. A dark circle spread outward, stretching hundreds of meters in every direction. Then, without warning, the sky split open, and a colossal pillar of black lightning descended from above. A heavenly spear of destruction that engulfed the earth and incinerated everything in its wake. It was as if the heavens themselves had descended. Amid the roaring thunder and Dragatha's insane laughter, Fry was burned alive, His body was charred, his flesh blackened and his features warped beyond recognition. That twisted face, the burnt flesh, the flowing blood, all of it was the result of just one brutal attack from Dragoth, who had completely overwhelmed his opponent. Dragoth laughed madly, but his smile vanished in an instant, because Fry Starlight had teleported once again, appearing right in front of him. His face half burned to the bone, with skin and flesh peeled away. He lunged and bit off Dragoth's ear, and part of his skull, in one monstrous bite. Fry looked like a beast that had crawled out of hell itself. A creature so horrific that Dragoth instinctively stepped back in fear. Fry chewed the filthy meat a few times before spitting the blood and flesh to the ground. With a sick grin, he gripped his swords and snarled into Dragoth's face. In the end, the taste of a human demon's flesh isn't much different from a piece of filthy shit. I wonder what you're made of, Dragoth. Fry howled in madness as violet flames roared across his body. And in the blink of an eye, his entire body regenerated, restoring him to his original form. Using his teleportation again, Fry appeared behind Dragoth's back. The demon turned instantly, swinging his sword in a wide arc that shattered the ground behind him. But it was nothing more than an illusion. Fry had already reappeared on his other side. Then, without warning, Fry plunged his sword deep into Dragoth's chest. With a bloodthirsty, terrifying grin, he roared, "Ignition!" Before Dragoth could even comprehend what was happening, Frey's body cracked open, unleashing a raging surge of aura that rushed violently into his blade. Unleashing a nuclear ignition through his sword, Fry obliterated Dragoth's body along with the entire space around them. The aura he released was so immense, a purple column pierced the sky, tearing it apart once more. This time in response to Dragoth's previous thunderstrike. That devastating attack left Dragoth in a grotesque state. His chest, left arm, and the left half of his face had been completely annihilated. Nothing remained but emptiness. For a moment, Dragoth looked shocked. But then, he let out a monstrous howl that shook the void itself. Within mere seconds, flesh and bone regenerated, filling the void and restoring his body to its original form. No sooner had he healed than he clashed with Fry again. The two tore into each other with savage brutality. Every sword swing ripping apart the ground beneath them. One was a deathless human demon, the other a Starlight Lord against whom physical damage meant nothing. It was pure savagery. A battle between two monsters who cared nothing for what happened to their bodies. Dragoth relied on raw, brute force. Fry, on the other hand, moved with insane speed, and every one of his attacks dealt significant damage. Realizing he was outmatched in terms of speed, Dragoth's aura flared intensely around him, and a strange gray glow enveloped his body. Lightning steps. Activating a special skill, he took a single step forward, vanishing and reappearing instantly behind Fry, slicing into his flesh and tearing through his shoulder. Dragoth's speed had multiplied several times, now matching that of Fry. But Fry healed instantly, and the two vanished together. Their movements were so fast they blinked in and out of sight, clashing momentarily before disappearing again, leaving behind nothing but ruin in their wake. The exchange repeated thousands of times in mere seconds, shaking the void from the sheer intensity. Their bodies left behind dozens of trails of exploding aura, intertwining in a chaotic dance, each one trying to dominate the other. Dark lightning of overwhelming might, and violet shadows of terrifying power. The clash continued for an extended time, at a speed far beyond the eye's ability to track. And with each exchange, bloodied wounds multiplied on both of them, gathering an immense surge of lightning aura. Gripping his colossal sword, Dragoth hurled himself toward Fry and tore through the sky. Ragen's wrath, Fong of the Flash. His attack split everything in its path into halves and threatened to completely erase Fry. But at the very last instant, Fry vanished, and from thin air, thousands of clones erupted around Dragoth in a blink. 10,000 steps of shadow mirage. In under a second, Fry conjured 10,000 perfect clones, all glowing with deadly intent, surrounding the human demon who couldn't comprehend what he was witnessing. All of them shouted in unison as dark aura surged around their swords. 10,000 steps of shadow, black severance. In that moment, 10,000 Freys launched 10,000 black blades toward Dragatha's body. 10,000 dark arcs tore into the human demon without mercy, shredding him so violently that his body became nothing but a bloody pulp. Dragatha's blood rained from the sky in torrents as his mangled body plummeted toward the ground. But just before his back could touch the earth, Fry appeared beneath him, raising his sword in preparation for a devastating impalement. And just as his sword pierced Dragatha's back, Fry whispered from his lips, "Ignition." Chapter 527. Sansa Valyrian versus the Lady of Eight Legs 1. Dragatha's body never touched the ground. Fry had vaporized it with another nuclear ignition, wiping him out of existence completely. It was a monstrous attack that left behind a massive crater, carved into a land already devastated beyond reason. The explosive violet aura took a long time to disperse, and when it finally began to fade, it revealed the catastrophe that Lord Starlight had just unleashed. Fry sat at the edge of the crater, leaning on one hand, his gaze fixed downward, at the bottom of the devastation he had caused. There, Dragoth appeared, kneeling on both knees, breathing heavily. His body was slowly regenerating, the outline of his figure gradually becoming visible once more after being obliterated by Frey's last strike. "You're pathetic, human demon," Fry said with eyes full of scorn and obvious disappointment toward the man before him. "Don't tell me this is all you've got." Staring down at his kneeling opponent, Fry rose again, his face carrying the look of someone about to step on an insect that meant nothing in his world. "Stop playing around and fight me seriously, bastard. I didn't come all this way just to see your pathetic state." His words were backed by the full release of his SSS rank aura, an overwhelming pressure that slammed Dragoth from his kneel into the dirt. Collapsing to the ground, Fry threatened to bury him deep beneath his aura alone. Amidst that infernal storm of pressure, Dragoth clenched his teeth as veins of fury slithered across his face like worms. Yet that rage quickly twisted into something far worse. Despair. A crippling realization struck him. He was helpless against the opponent before him. Fry Starlight was no longer the same young man from before. He had become something else entirely. A different kind of monster, one unlike Abraham Starlight. Dragoth had seen it once before. A year ago during the Great Pursuit. Back then, Fry had looked so insignificant that the human devil hadn't even deemed him worthy of attention. But now reality had turned on its head. In less than a single year. What the hell happened? How? What did he do to gain such power? Dragoth cursed under his breath, overtaken by a feeling he hadn't tasted in years. Not since his battle against Abraham Starlight, the one that ended with him utterly crushed. Defeat was looming again, and this time death might follow. In those fleeting moments of hopelessness and disbelief, memories buried deep within his mind surged back. Flashes of that distant time when he was secretly imprisoned, locked away in one of the Empire's deepest cells. There he had been tortured by that man, that monster, who subjected him to torment so unbearable that madness eventually consumed him. Dragoth had lost once before, and as a result he endured hell. The hell of agony, ruin, and insanity, all because of one defeat. And now he stood on the precipice of another. That pressure, that despair, it twisted something inside him. Without thinking, his fingers pressed the trigger. Without warning, the air around them distorted. The ground trembled violently beneath Dragoth as he rose once more. His claws dug deep into the earth, and his body convulsed grotesquely, revealing hidden horrors from within. His crimson pupils vanished, leaving behind only white voids. Releasing a flood of dark, viscous aura, he blanketed the ground with a monstrous energy that oozed dread. The human devil had risen again, dragging his sword behind him with a shriek of steel. The pressure he released. That man, weeping blood from his eyes, was on a different level altogether. A force so chilling it sent a cold shiver crawling down Frey's spine. And Fry, witnessing the madness bloom in the monster before him, let out a quiet laugh. Finally, he slipped on the nameless mask, stepping forward to meet his opponent. Dragoth had become something else entirely, and Fry couldn't help but laugh again. I suppose the father and son share the same madness, don't they? They were remarkably alike. Both of their minds shattered the moment true pressure descended upon them. Whether it was Dragoth falling into madness, or his son V transforming into something else entirely at death's doorstep. Truly, accursed bloodline. Now standing before the true form of the human devil, Fry Starlight readied himself for the real battle. Come at me with everything you've got, human demon. That marked the beginning. The start of a clash even more savage than all that came before. On the other side of this war, far from the carnage unleashed by Fry Starlight and Dragoth, another monstrous clash was about to erupt. A towering creature was making its way toward the human army, hell-bent on their annihilation. The Lady of Eight Legs. A colossal ancient being, one that grew stronger by feeding on its own children. Should that abomination reach the battlefield, it would spell doom for the Empire's forces. Which is why, in a thunderous flash, a certain demoness pierced the skies with her wings. Sansa Valyrian, now face to face with the grotesque creature, she finally understood just how massive the Lady of Eight Legs truly was. A hulking behemoth, so vast she dwarfed even the mightiest of mountains. Compared to her, Sansa looked like an ant. Every step the creature took sent tremors surging through the ground. Even in her demonic form, Sansa couldn't do anything but tremble at the sight of a beast whose scale defied belief. The Lady of Eight Legs completely blotted out the sky. She stood well over 200 meters tall. I have to stop this thing here. Now that she had seen it up close, Sansa realized she had no choice. She would have to face this monster alone and prevent it from entering the other battlefronts. Or catastrophe would follow. And yet, despite her presence, the creature didn't even acknowledge her. It simply continued its crawl toward the main cluster of humans, where Snow and the others were stationed. Gathering her shadow aura, dark tendrils began slithering across Sansa's skin. She prepared herself. Let's see how long you can ignore me. With a wave of her hand, a massive shadow expanded to cover a wide area beneath the eight-legged lady. From within that shadow, Sansa summoned a vast amount of aura, forming thousands of shadow serpents that erupted without warning. They slithered up the lady's towering body, coiling tightly around her limbs and torso. Her 8 legs and her entire form were soon engulfed by an overwhelming number of serpents, looking more like black ropes that forcibly restrained the monstrous creature, halting her advance. Shrouded in darkness, Sansa extended her arms forward, veins bulging beneath her unnaturally solid skin. Her face was tense, as though she were locked in a tug-of-war against 100,000 men. It felt as if her body would rip apart at any moment under the unbearable strain, as her shadowy ropes barely managed to restrain the 8-legged lady for a few seconds. And just as she believed she had succeeded in stopping her, the creature opened its mouth and let out a scream. But it wasn't just any scream. Coming from a beast of that size, it was like a nuclear blast, one that shook both the earth and the skies. The sonic wave ruptured Sansa's eardrums and shredded her shadows to pieces, freeing the lady with ease. At that moment, the beast finally turned her attention to Sansa, glaring at her with her single massive eye, an orb so enormous it looked like a planet. Then, with a single movement, 2 of her colossal spider legs rose high into the sky, forming a sight so terrifying they resembled tree trunks threatening to pierce the heavens. Without warning, they came crashing down. Sansa saw the attack coming, but there was little she could do. The lady's legs descended like twin meteors, massive, fast, and inescapable. All Sansa could do was brace for impact. In that instant, it felt as though the world had flipped upside down and crushed her. Her body was driven deep into the ground, buried mercilessly beneath the devastating blow. The destruction left in the wake of that simple attack was on a completely different level. One that the earth was never meant to withstand. Amid the rubble and devastation, the lady stared at the wreckage for a brief moment before continuing her advance as if nothing had happened. She crawled on her 8 legs with terrifying speed, threatening to breach the Imperial front lines. A disaster in the making. Behind her, from deep within the earth, a broken demoness began to crawl. Chapter 528. Sansa Valyrian versus the Lady of 8 Legs. 2. Sansa, shattered by the previous blow. Her body was absurdly durable, but even she felt as though every bone inside her had crumbled from that strike. Her dark eyes remained fixed on the retreating beast as she emerged, dragging herself from the crater where she'd been buried. "Am I just an ant to you, crushed without a second thought while you carry on as if I never existed?" She grinned darkly, fury painted across her bloodied face. Clenching her fists violently, the demoness launched herself from the ground once more, soaring after the creature. "I'll show you," Sansa hissed as shadows burst from her body without pause. "I'll make you understand what terror truly means." From behind her back, hundreds, no thousands, of black tendrils erupted. Dark abominations tore through her flesh, ripping her back open as they surged outward like writhing worms from another world. The tendrils swelled to monstrous sizes until Sansa herself looked like a speck in a sea of darkness. They trembled violently, then split open to reveal gaping maws, giant, terrifying mouths that seemed to devour the very air. With a wave of her hand, Sansa unleashed them. The ravenous mouths surged forward, destroying everything in their path as they lunged straight for the 8-legged lady. The beast shrieked furiously, her 8 legs rising into the sky to defend herself. But Sansa wasn't about to let history repeat itself. She forced her aura past its limits, forging 8 black spears, each blazing like cursed wildfire. Each spear stretched over 100 meters long. An impossible feat for any sane person to believe came from a single being. She hurled them with fury, sending them hurtling toward the monster's limbs. Seconds later, they struck, triggering an earthquake that would not be forgotten. Sansa's spears pierced the lady's legs successfully, drawing unending screams from the enormous creature. And Sansa only laughed in madness. "What the hell are you screaming for? You already blew out my damn ears. I can't hear a thing." With a flick of her wrist, the spears slammed into the ground, acting like stakes that pinned the lady's limbs in place. Meanwhile, the black tendrils continued to coil around the beast's body, devouring her without mercy. Surrounded in shadows, with blood pouring from her nose and mouth from aura overexertion, Sansa floated above the creature, her expression twisted with grim delight. "Now then, be a good little bitch and let me end you quietly." Sansa clenched again, drawing more shadows into form. A single massive spear emerged, far greater than any before, a final weapon to end the grotesque being before her. But just as she was about to release it, her demonic eyes met the lady's lone eye. Just one glance, and then everything was annihilated. From the void, the lady opened her mouth, and from it surged a beam of pure aura, a devastating cannon of energy, fired by a creature larger than mountains. The beam consumed Sansa, her spear, and everything behind her for dozens of kilometers. A cataclysmic attack of pure, overwhelming aura. When the lady closed her mouth once more, what stood before her was a long trail of devastation, a colossal path of death where everything that had existed had been completely annihilated. The lady immediately began screaming mad, hysterical howls, ripping her own 8 limbs apart in a frenzy. Her blood flooded the earth like a sunken deluge. Then, amidst that madness, from where her limbs had been torn off, 16 new legs sprouted in their place. Just like that, those calamities doubled in number as if it were nothing, revealing the horrifying truth about her power. Her ability to regenerate and multiply her limbs whenever they were severed. But who could have predicted that the one who would mutilate her would be the lady herself? Now, with her power doubled, the lady crawled toward the demoness who had stood against her, and whom she had now acknowledged as a true opponent. Sansa had become prey, a target the lady wished to devour, to absorb her power. But before that towering catastrophe, Sansa lay on the ground, her body charred to ruin from the previous attack, thrown into complete chaos. Everything on her body had been obliterated by that last strike. Had she not wrapped herself in her shadows at the last moment, she would have perished without a doubt. Even with all her power used to defend herself, the damage she sustained was staggering. Her black blood continued to seep out without pause. And now, the lady loomed over her, stronger than ever, an entity more monstrous than anything before. Yet in front of such a hellish being, Sansa felt no fear, no despair, only rage. Unyielding fury twisted the veins on her face like worms as she stood back up. "You bitch!" Slamming both hands into the ground, Sansa let out a bone-chilling scream that drained every ounce of strength left in her. From beneath her trembling, convulsing body, a tremendous shadow erupted, larger than anything she had ever unleashed before. This shadow didn't just envelop the lady, it devoured everything within dozens of kilometers. Black blood burst from her pores and every crevice of her body as Sansa raised her arms, slowly, opening the gates of hell beneath the eight-legged lady. Shadows surged from all directions, piercing the lady's body relentlessly. Dark spikes, tentacles, and appendages from another realm. They tore into her mercilessly. The lady tried to open her mouth once more to unleash that aura beam again. But Sansa wasn't about to let it happen this time. She forcibly shut that maw with sheer power, summoning hundreds of giant hands from beneath her foe, slamming her mouth shut. She screamed with such force that her consciousness nearly faded. Then, Sansa raised her arms to the sky, commanding the shadows to obey. And in a scene of pure dread, the shadows lifted the lady into the air, carrying a creature whose weight rivaled the mightiest of mountains. The process felt like being crushed by divine forces, but she refused to stop. Shadows wrapped tightly around the lady's massive body, restricting her completely as she was lifted ever higher, and then beneath her. The shadows compressed tighter and tighter, condensing into a single colossal spear. A spear forged from every last drop of Sansa's remaining power. It was monstrous, so dense and massive that even the void around it trembled. The spear was larger than the lady herself. Sansa could feel her mind slipping with every second. So the moment it was complete, she released the lady, and the beast fell from the sky, falling like divine judgment. Until impact, an impact that shook the entire continent, one that made the world itself recognize the scale of what had just occurred. The eight-legged lady had fallen directly upon the massive spear, which impaled her through her massive body and pierced her singular, titanic eye. The nightmare creature screamed in agony as her blood poured out onto the colossal black spear. But no matter how much she writhed, no matter how violently her limbs trembled, there was nothing she could do but die slowly, skewered and lifted high into the heavens. On the other end of the battlefield, the demoness collapsed to the ground, drenched in a pool of her own black blood, having utterly exhausted herself. Her body struggled to keep her alive. She had paid a terrible price, but in the end, she had fulfilled her mission perfectly. She had proven that she could stand by his side. She had proven she could endure this blood-soaked path, the path that Fry Starlight walked. And on that day, Sansa Valyrian became the second person in history to slay one of the Nightmare Lords, right after Abraham Starlight. Chapter 529. Till the Last Breath. 1. Above the ruins of Yharnam, the city erased from existence, the earth trembled. The void itself shuddered as the body of Dragoth, the human demon, wailed, unrestrained and ungoverned. His crimson eyes had turned white, a sign of madness and the complete loss of self. His aura swelled monstrously, and the way he carried himself into battle had changed entirely. He had become something else altogether. In front of him, Fry donned the nameless mask, bracing himself for what was to come. Now it begins. Dragoth, the human demon. Dragoth didn't reach that level by normal means. There's a reason he has only ever lost once in his life. When Dragoth is pushed to the brink of defeat, something inside his mind activates. A trigger of sorts, pulled only when he's overwhelmed with despair. When that happens, he transforms into a different kind of monster. The Dragoth now standing before Fry could be considered the pinnacle of the SS Plus rank. He's probably the strongest living human on this planet. Stronger even than Sir Alone and Mikar Valerian. That was the caliber of monster Fry Starlight was about to face. And yet, Fry prepared himself fully, ready to unleash everything he had. Retreat was never an option. If I can't handle this level, how could I ever dream of facing the monsters lurking in the shadows? If he lost to Dragoth here, then he'd never be able to challenge beings like Zebar or even Geppetto. Fry felt it deep within, this battle would determine his fate. "Shall we begin?" he said, hiding his face behind the metallic black mask. And Dragoth responded to the call. With a bestial war cry, he crushed the ground beneath his feet and lunged at his enemy, lightning coiling wildly around his body. With a single swing of his sword, Dragoth unleashed a massive slash that ripped through Fry and everything behind him. Though Fry managed to block it, a terrifying vertical gash opened along his right side. His attack power has doubled. Realizing the massive difference between them, Fry flooded his body with even more aura, forcing himself to keep up with Dragoth's berserk state. The human demon, his sword cloaked in black lightning, attacked relentlessly. Up, right, left. He was far too fast. Every strike of his sword was enough to obliterate the ground and everything in it. The skies above roared and flashed in response to his madness. Bolts of lightning struck down one after another, non-stop, raining down indiscriminately. The assault was so feral that Dragoth didn't even aim at Fry specifically. He was destroying everything around him. Trapped in close quarters, Fry clashed swords with Dragoth, laughing loudly amidst the chaos. His powers affecting the very laws of nature. This is insane. Dragoth no longer cared for techniques or refined combat styles. He only cared about annihilating whatever stood in his path. His instincts screamed to eliminate the greatest threat near him, and that threat was none other than Fry. Fry had already realized the brutal nature of the power Dragoth now possessed. Engaging him directly in a head-on battle was far from wise. The smart move was to stall, wear him down, and chip away slowly. But Fry chose the opposite. He granted Dragoth absolute advantage. "You want brutality? Then let's make this a brutal battle." His swords flared with roaring violet light. While his muscles swelled to near bursting from the sheer amount of aura he channeled into this fight. He used no flashy techniques, not even his usual swift combat style. He simply exchanged blows with Dragoth in pure savagery, letting shadow adaptation take over blindly. Wounds piled up on both of them, but they didn't even need a second to heal. They regenerated instantly. Whether it was Dragoth or Fry, both possessed monstrous bodies that no longer resembled those of humans. Bodies that constantly restored themselves no matter the injury. Their hands were like rocket launchers, continuing to swing and strike regardless of pain or damage. Frey's swords carved thousands of violet arcs into the air, while Dragoth's black lightning filled the entire battlefield. So much so that even the sky bent to his will. It was clear the human demon held the advantage. In terms of raw physicality, he far outmatched his opponent. He was so fast and savage that one of his strikes annihilated half of Frey's body in a single hit. And yet, Fry stood back up and continued fighting as if nothing had happened. Dragoth's current body is the peak of SS+, a form honed through brutal training and demonic power. Against this kind of strength, I need to know. Boom! Despite the pain, Fry never stopped wearing that twisted smile beneath his mask. I want to know how far this chaotic body of mine can go. Compared to the tyrant Dragoth, what could his own body, formed from layers upon layers of chaos, truly achieve? There wasn't a single stable element in Frey's physique. His raw strength was far below his opponent's. He only matched up by stacking external advantages. A strange aura of the SSS rank. 2 legendary swords from which he drew great power. And a miraculous ability that allowed him to adapt to every phenomenon around him. Cursed mask. One that carried within it knowledge vast enough to surpass the size of the entire universe. All of it had been crammed into a single human body. No human should ever be able to endure something like that, but Fry did, and as a result, he became the monster he is now. That was how Dragoth and Fry crushed each other, again and again, without pause. Blow after blow, strike after strike, blood for blood. The exchange was so fast the ground beneath them simply couldn't take it. They had no choice but to dart in all directions as they continued to pound each other into oblivion. A missile of black lightning clashed against a dark projectile of pure shadow. Their trajectories formed a colossal web. A glowing cocoon of destruction that radiated its blinding light across the entire battlefield. And the sky, it chose Dragoth. It sent more and more bolts of lightning to empower him, to bless his madness. Anyone who laid eyes on that battlefield would never believe what they were seeing. Neither earth nor sky had been spared. Crimson blood poured like a flood, and Frey's body had been reduced to chaos. So wrecked that only his face remained intact, protected solely by the cursed mask. Dragoth's speed and power kept rising, climbing higher and higher, granting him a complete and overwhelming edge. But despite that advantage, his opponent never fell. Fry stood. He stood through everything that was thrown at him. He absorbed every wave of that violent rage. What's wrong, Dragoth? Keep going. I know you've got way more than this. Boom! Their swords clashed once again. Auras tore through each other in wild, frenzied collision. Show me how far someone like you can really push me. How long would his regeneration last? What were the limits of his body? How much pain could he endure before it all collapsed? These were the questions Fry wanted answered. Through this brutal collision with Dragoth. Chapter 530. Till the last breath, 2. I've reached my peak. There's no path left for me to grow stronger. Only the path of blood remains. This body I've sculpted to perfection. My mind, my reflexes, honed through countless battles between life and death. The superhuman talents that once placed me above my peers. All of my struggle, all of my suffering that's led me to this moment. Let me see just how far it can all take me. Against you, Dragoth, the one who stands at the peak of humanity, unfazed by pain, unbothered by anything his opponent could throw at him. Fry endured. Not once did his back touch the ground. Have I ever, even once in this life, lived without something being stolen from me? Has this life ever given me anything I could point to and say, with certainty, that I lived with pride? No. I've stopped expecting anything good from this life. I'm tired of suffering, of being powerless to change a damn thing. And I know it all too well, that more horrors await me if I keep walking down this path. Under a sky that flashed with relentless fury, and a ground that trembled in mourning, Fry faced the very same monster his father had once faced. And in that moment time itself slowed. His mind sank deeper and deeper into the abyss of his own soul. So many scars had shaped the person he had become. And he already knew. His suffering was just entertainment. A play for the onlookers watching from the dark. I wonder, what kind of faces do they make when they witness my downfall? Do they laugh at my pain? Mock me? Or just sit there, silently enjoying the show? If that's the case, then good for them. Little by little, Frey's aura intensified. His strikes grew more vicious, more savage, and Dragoth over time began to lose his edge. His opponent was matching him evenly now, landing devastating blows. From this point forward, I'll show you a completely different kind of performance. There was no longer any point in resisting the current. No point in fighting the script others had written for him. Instead, Fry chose a different game entirely. For the first time, he swam with the current, not against it. He embraced the desires of whoever had pushed him from the shadows. But instead of delivering more suffering and despair, Fry revealed something else altogether. A glimpse of madness, savage bloodlust, a craving for death. He became a broken man, a warrior who didn't fear death, but opened his arms to it, welcoming it with joy. Victory, or death. He wouldn't let others die before him anymore. On the battlefield, he would be the first to receive whatever hell the enemy had in store. He would fight, no matter who the opponent was, even if they surpassed him by far. He would stand against whatever life hurled at him, until the very end. If he won, that was fine. If he lost and died, that was fine too. After all, it would be a merciful end, one he didn't believe he deserved in the first place. Strangely, amid the vortex of destruction, amid the chaos and ruin of his battle against Dragoth, Fry felt peace. A profound calmness drew his awareness away. Despite the shredded, blood-soaked wreck of his body, he felt at ease, as if something had plucked him out of existence and pulled him into darkness. He was no longer on the battlefield. Dragoth was gone. Fry found himself inside a void of shadows, a familiar emptiness that stirred feelings of nostalgia and longing. Before him, a simple campfire burned gently, casting its light across the blackness. Its warmth eased the weight in his chest. Around it, several figures sat quietly beside him, their eyes all drawn to the dancing flames. The darkness had hidden their faces, leaving only faint, fragmented outlines visible in the glow. "Did you reach your limits this quickly?" asked the person sitting to Frey's right, staring at him with a warm smile. "Not at all. This is only the beginning," Fry replied with a laugh, only to be cut off immediately by another voice. "That's an obvious lie. You only come to this place when you're broken." A third figure nodded in agreement. "You can't lie to us, Fry. In the end, we are you." At that moment, the campfire flared up violently, casting more light around it. Light that finally revealed the faces of everyone present. Everyone around that fire looked exactly the same. All of them were Fry, but from different timelines and distant moments. The current Fry chuckled lightly, placing a hand on his chest. "To be honest, it's getting harder with every battle. With every soul my sword reaps, I feel like I lose a part of myself. I no longer know what I'll become once this is over." Lowering his head with a faint smile and tired eyes, Fry spoke in a quiet voice. "Maybe I've reached my limit. Maybe I've run out of strength to carry on. Perhaps that's why I came here, hoping one of you would take my place." He laughed at himself, while most of those present averted their gaze. "That's impossible. You are the strongest among us, the only one who can bear this path," said one of the Freys, specifically the one who had won the Victoriad. Many others nodded in agreement. Among them, Fry the writer, the one who lived a peaceful life, spoke while poking the fire with a thin stick. "You are our strongest self, the version we created to bear what we couldn't. I know this is cruel, perhaps the cruelest kind of pain, one even worse than everything before, but you'll endure it," said the white-haired Fry who had endured the time loops in Launder. The current Fry just laughed quietly, covering his face with his right hand. "This is horrible. Am I just a monster you throw all your fears at? All your pain? Do you expect me to keep fighting, bearing all your burdens? You, who gave up halfway?" "That's right," answered the one just before the current version. Fry, who had been forced to kill Danzo with his own hands. "That's why we created you, to be the monster that slaughters our enemies. To be the one who teaches them the meaning of the terror they made us taste. You are the product of everything we've sacrificed until now, and every sin we've committed in our cursed life," added another version. "So keep fighting. Fight until your back breaks, until your enemies' corpses form mountains, and their blood floods the seas. Fight until death finally claims you." and this dark tale is given an ending. You are that kind of monster, so act like it. That is your truth. Burdened with the wishes and wills of all those eyes that had pierced into him, Fry slowly found himself returning to reality. Behind the nameless mask, his mouth opened slightly, showing a hint of confusion and surprise, only to twist into a smile. "Ah, I remember now," he muttered slowly, returning to the chaotic battlefield against Dragoth. In that moment, his long white hair flew upward, and his pale skin cracked, revealing purple serpents slithering across it. His face tore open, and dozens of aura veins burst from his eyes. His mouth split, exposing a smile dripping with madness. "I am the monster forged by this cruel world." Chapter 531. Till the Last Breath, 3. In a blink, Frey's blades tore through Dragoth without mercy, unleashing a torrent of destructive aura shells. Fighting like a lunatic, Fry realized he was no longer sane. Life had pushed him far beyond that point. All he could do now was create illusions, sanctuaries of the mind. Every time he fell into despair, Fry had forged a new version of himself. Stronger, fiercer, more unbreakable. And this Fry, the current one, was the ultimate embodiment of all that accumulated suffering. A merciless beast. "Look at me! Look at the monster I've become!" 10,000 steps of shadow, Fry Starlight style. Nameless judgment. Boom! With one devastating blow born of madness, Fry split the very world in half, obliterating Dragoth's body as he tried to resist. "This is what you wanted to see, isn't it? This is the madness you demanded." Grabbing Dragoth's mangled face, barely holding together, Fry dragged him across the battlefield, grinding his face into the ground and anything standing upon it. "I am a killing machine. I was born to slaughter, born to destroy, and yes, death and destruction. That's exactly what I'll deliver." Fry screamed into Dragoth's face before tossing him away, only to chase after him like a beast. "The boy is dead. The weakling who cried and suffered from your games is gone. He no longer exists." He hurled Dragoth's body again and again, then paused suddenly, gripping his opponent's shattered face once more. "Look at me," he said, slamming Dragoth's face into the ground once again. "Look at me!" Screaming madly, Frey's body erupted, unleashing utter devastation. Ignition. With a single word, a nuclear-level ignition shook the world once more, firing a colossal pillar of dark aura toward the sky. From that blast, Dragoth's body was completely obliterated, leaving behind nothing but his head and a fragment of his chest. Dragoth couldn't break free. Frey's grip remained firm. "What do you see when you look at me? What exactly do you think resides inside me? What is it that you expect of me? There's nothing left, nothing but the void. The void, and a raging hunger, an unending thirst, a madness with no bottom." Frey's body trembled uncontrollably. His eyes lost their light and quivered in their sockets. Everything slipped away. Death. That's all that's left. Hurling Dragoth's body toward the sky, Fry brought his swords down upon his enemy. Words no longer came from his mouth, only meaningless, chaotic scribbles as he lost himself completely. His sword unleashed a blazing violet arc that shook the world. He had lost the clarity of mind even to name his attack. The nameless judgment became a wailing elegy. Mourning his current state, Fry unleashed it once, then again, and again. The sky turned violet. His hand burst from the sheer pressure, flesh and bones scattering across the battlefield. But he didn't care. He kept attacking until nothing was left of his enemy but ash. He walked across the battlefield, whispering words that held no meaning. He had become the killing machine he once dreamed of. The monster who could endure anything. The monster who would never stop fighting. No matter how brutal life became, a beast who would fight until death. Fry started walking, then running, then leaping, flying. With terrifying speed, and a black, ominous aura crawling over him. He charged toward anyone who dared raise their sword against him. "Kill them," said all the versions of Fry at once. "Rip them apart. Annihilate them. Every single one who dared curse us with this life. Don't stop running. If you can't run, walk. If you can't walk, crawl. But don't stop. Not until every last enemy is dead." Leaving behind the crater of destruction he had created, Fry abandoned everything and lunged forward, toward where his enemies awaited. He spoke rapidly, but what came from his mouth wasn't language, just whispers from the depths of hell. He covered a monstrous distance in a blink, threatening to obliterate anything in his path. But his berserk advance was halted when a massive pillar of light descended from the sky, engulfing him mercilessly and obliterating everything around him. Fry crashed violently to the ground, but he immediately twisted back up, scanning for the source of the attack, only to see her floating high above in the sky, looking down at him with blatant contempt. "Is this the answer you've chosen, Fry Starlight?" Waving her wand, Beatrice prepared for battle. "I've lived long and seen much, but I've never encountered anything like you." Even the Eternal Witch herself hadn't lived long enough to witness a creature so twisted and deranged as the one before her. Fry crawled slowly along the ground before vanishing entirely. Even in that state of madness, he could still teleport. He erased the distance in an instant. Magic resistance triggered automatically, preventing Beatrice from reacting. And his swords threatened to erase her from existence. But she didn't say much. "He's all yours, Beleth." At the moment she spoke his name, just as Frey's blades were mere inches from her face, a colossal fist emerged from the void, slamming into Frey's right side and shattering his body. One strike crushed his bones and tore through his flesh, sending him flying away like a ragdoll. The figure who struck him descended from the sky, charging across the ground toward Fry. "This is the monster you're all afraid of?" His voice was harsh and gravelly. His body was massive, well over 3 meters tall. His hair was a wild, bloody red, and his eyes were consumed by shadow. Only a cursed red gleam shone through. He bore 2 horns, one of them broken, and his body was covered in some strange, black substance. He collided with Fry, mercilessly crushing him. "I came from far away just for the chance to enjoy a good fight. Don't disappoint me," he roared with laughter. Beleth, demon of the 18th highest rank, one of the demons of the Black faction. He laughed maniacally as he raised his massive fist again, aiming to pulverize Fry further. But his smile vanished instantly when Fry disappeared, reappearing behind him in less than a heartbeat. One moment, then hundreds of violet slashes tore into Beleth's body, shredding him without mercy. "Don't underestimate him. Fight him with everything you have." Behind Beatrice, hundreds of celestial spheres materialized, bombarding the battlefield mercilessly, targeting Fry. "I know, damn it," Beleth growled. Unaffected by his injuries, he charged forward, his fists blazing with seething dark aura. He collided with Fry head-on, even as Beatrice's infernal barrage rained down upon him. Amid the chaos, Fry never stopped talking. He kept producing sounds from his mouth. But they weren't in any language, just meaningless, guttural scribbles. "What sort of curse are you trying to place on us, Fry Starlight?" Chapter 532. Till the Last Breath, 4. With his bare fists, Beleth clashed against Frey's swords, forcing him back. Infernal rampage, eruption of the Chaos Lords. Manipulating his aura, the demon Beleth formed 2 grotesque ghoul heads from his fists. Their jaws gaped open, ready to devour Fry whole. The attack was so immense it swept through everything around them, leaving Fry trapped within the chaos. "If this is the best humanity's pinnacle can offer, then there was no point in me coming here at all," Beleth laughed, crushing Fry beneath his fist. But the response came swiftly. A blinding violet light exploded from within the ghoulish mouths, erasing them in an instant. Fry didn't just block the attack. he retaliated, slashing through Beleth with such speed that even the demon couldn't hide his shock. Seriously? Ignoring the foul black blood oozing from his wound, Beleth lunged at Fry again. But Fry fought like a beast, utterly unconcerned for his body or the wounds inflicted on it. He didn't want anything but to erase his enemies from existence. He may have tried to speak, but no proper words left his mouth anymore. He had lost himself entirely. There was no trace left of Fry Starlight the human. Only a twisted, mangled creature so terrifying even demons paused in wonder. Beatrice had come, the 17th ranked demon, and Beleth with her, the 18th. Both stood at the pinnacle of SS+, a combined force capable of turning the tide of war, but for some reason, they still couldn't stop Fry. He tore across the battlefield like a madman, his sword ripping through demonic flesh like paper. His aura burned away faster than his blood, and his attacks were more lethal than theirs. It only took a few exchanges for Beleth to realize the truth. The monster before him was stronger. Left with no other option, he joined forces with Beatrice. They fought together, attacked him with everything they had. But Fry didn't fall. He clashed with them without pause. A monster who didn't care about pain. A monster whose body shook from sheer madness. A twisted being clawing out of hell, targeting their throats. And in that moment, Beatrice understood, if only a little, why Fry Starlight had become the center of everything. What's his secret? She wondered, watching him. He hasn't reached SSS class, but he surpasses SS+. I've never seen a case like this before. If there were a rank between the two, it would bear his name. Those were the witch's thoughts as she tried to unravel the mystery of the monster before her. But that curiosity vanished instantly. When Fry launched another nameless judgment, targeting both her and Beleth in one go, Beatrice immediately summoned the strongest shield in her arsenal. A shield capable of withstanding even SS+ attacks. Beleth shielded her with his own body, but even with their combined effort, Frey's devastating attack shattered her shield and left a deep, gruesome wound across Beleth's chest. They survived, but that strike left them even more terrified of this distorted monster. Even after combining our powers, he still managed to wound me this badly, muttered Beleth, his tone finally serious. Beatrice, capturing him alive in this state is impossible. We have no choice but to kill him. But Beatrice immediately refused. No, he must stay alive. That's Lord Weskier's command. Gripping her staff tightly, the witch prepared to unleash everything she had. We'll defeat him here, and drag him back with us, even if we have to shatter him to do it. And with those words, from either side of Fry, two figures appeared in the blink of an eye, using powerful teleportation. Both slashed into Fry with terrifying speed, as if the battle wasn't hard enough already. Now Murgo and Gavid Lindman had joined the fray, surrounding him. We'll use everything at our disposal, and end it here, said Beatrice. Following her lead, for SS+ level warriors surrounded a single man. A man who swore to shoulder everything alone, and fight to the bitter end. A man who swore he would never lose again, that his back would never touch the ground again. It was a brutal battle, a sorrowful fight, for a monster forged from agony and despair. Frey's mind was utterly blank. There was no way to bring him back. Only one thing possessed him now, an all-consuming desire to kill. He clashed with them all, fought with every ounce of his soul. He never looked back. Not once. Never tried to escape. Not even once. To the very end, he stood his ground, and showed them a hell unlike any other. The battle raged for a long time. The battlefield became molten with aura. Lava made not of fire, but raw aura. That aura spread everywhere, reshaping the land entirely. And with every passing second, his enemies grew more terrified, more certain that this monster should never be allowed to live. They began ignoring their orders. They tried to kill him for real, but even then they couldn't do it. The sky abandoned its darkness, turning violet from the sheer pressure of Frey's aura. It bled into everything, coloring the world in something new, something different. Except for Beatrice, who remained in the rear, Murgo, Gavid, and Beleth were all in horrific condition, torn apart by his blades. Even the witch herself had nearly exhausted her aura. They threw everything they had at him, and still he didn't fall. He had lost consciousness. His eyes held no light anymore, but he still stood. His condition was worse than all of them combined. There wasn't a single spot on his body left untouched. Except for that cursed black mask. That mask alone sent shivers through their hearts. Seeing him standing in that pitiful state, they understood something. This was a man who feared not death, but longed for it. If his back ever touched the ground, it would be as a corpse, not the living. If they didn't kill him, he would keep fighting forever if he had to. That kind of will, that burning fire within him, left them all speechless, because in the end, the man standing before them was just a boy barely 19 years old, a miracle who had surpassed everyone before him. Even his father now seemed like a flickering shadow in comparison. Realizing the magnitude of the monster before them, they struck together. All of them, aimed for his life, eager to end his legend. It was a vicious struggle right to the end, and that end was just a beginning, because Frey was never going to escape this life so easily. From nothingness, a storm of searing flame erupted, encircling Frey and shielding him from harm. From the heart of that flame emerged phoenix sunlight, pulling Frey's broken body away. Dodging back as fast as he could, the enemies reacted instantly, targeting Phoenix at once, but the sky flashed violently above them as another figure descended, raining hundreds of lightning bolts upon their heads. Wearing the legendary Fume Knight armor, Mikar Valyrian had entered the massacre. Phoenix understood there was no running, so once Frey was pulled far enough from the chaos, he turned back immediately, joining Mikar on the battlefield. Terror was written on their faces as they saw what remained of the battlefield. The sheer devastation was why they had rushed here with such urgency. They didn't fully understand what had happened, but their minds focused on only one thing. The enemy is in front of us. Another battle was about to erupt. A fight destined to tear this cursed continent apart once more. Chapter 533. Rage Beyond SS+1. After a suicidal assault by Frey Starlight against the enemy leaders, leaving behind massive destruction, the chaos of that battlefield drew the eyes of the entire world. From afar, the powerful could feel the violent fluctuations of aura erupting in waves. The amount of aura unleashed in that last fight was on a completely different level. In his berserk state, Frey wasn't a mere warrior. He was a relentless killing machine that wouldn't stop until either he or everything around him was dead. At one point, in the midst of that grueling clash against 4 SS+ rank opponents, Frey finally lost consciousness. His body had endured that hell, but his mind had reached its absolute limit. In the final moments, Phoenix Sunlight and Mikar Valyrian intervened, barely saving him before engaging the enemy themselves. Phoenix hurled Frey's limp body as far away from danger as possible, then turned back without hesitation, igniting his flames to their utmost limit, ready for war. His crimson eyes swept over the battlefield again and again, until they locked on his foes. 2 demons and the 2 strongest among the lords of the Ultras. The battlefield had become a living hell, reaching a level of devastation Phoenix had never witnessed before. What kind of battle could have caused this? And then he clashed head-on with the 18th ranked demon. Beleth. Gritting his teeth, Phoenix unleashed his ember form, the state that instantly propelled him to the very peak of SS+. His blazing fist collided violently with Beleth's own. The resulting explosion obliterated everything in their vicinity. In that single exchange, Phoenix understood the measure of his opponent's power. The impact alone sent a wave of pain tearing through his entire arm. But Phoenix didn't falter. Ignoring the agony, his fiery aura swelled rapidly, while Baelith's body was engulfed in an equally overwhelming shroud of darkness. Within moments, the two were trading blows in a savage, frenzied storm of destruction. Realizing the caliber of the foe before him, Phoenix's expression darkened. Another high-ranked demon, so it wasn't a lie. The seal really has been broken, and nothing's holding these monsters back anymore. Baelith's appearance was proof that the war humanity had been fighting had entered the unknown. At any moment, more of these higher-ranked abominations could arrive. That thought could only bring despair, but Phoenix shoved the fear aside, focusing entirely on the fight. Elsewhere, Mikar Valyrian was locked in a blisteringly fast battle against Murgo and Gavid Lindman, both pressing him hard. But unlike his weakened political position as emperor, Mikar was an unquestionable force on the battlefield. Wielding Sunfire Spear and Fume Knight Shield, having reached the pinnacle of SS+, he held his ground against both enemies at once, unleashing lightning and fire in a relentless attempt to overwhelm and end them swiftly. But his foe's strength was formidable, and Beatrice was far from idle. With Frey Starlight, and his potent anti-magic that had restrained her, now absent, the Eternal which unleashed her full arsenal, seizing control of the entire battlefield. Celestial orbs flooded the skies, bombarding Emperor Mikar with an overwhelming barrage of multi-elemental blasts, while the ground beneath Phoenix split apart at her command, swallowing him whole. The battle was not going in the Empire's favor, for against two meant they were barely holding on. If not for the fact that their enemies were already wounded and exhausted from the previous clash, Phoenix and Mikar wouldn't have stood a chance at matching them blow for blow. Not bad. Baelith snarled with a sadistic grin as he cornered Phoenix completely. They were both monsters. But Phoenix, in particular, had become a walking volcano, burning and charring the earth with every step, hurling torrents of molten fire in every direction. At one point, his flames burned so hot they shifted to blue, the sheer output threatening to consume everything. Yet even in his full-powered ember state, despite giving it everything he had, he was barely keeping up against the combined assault of Beatrice and Baelith, both still far from full strength. Somewhere in the midst of the chaos, both Phoenix and Mikar found themselves thinking the exact same thought. Frey Starlight, are you telling me that frail-looking boy fought all four of these monsters alone, and not only survived, but pushed them this far? For Mikar, it was a passing shock, but for Phoenix Sunlight, it was a decisive moment. The instant he understood what his pupil had accomplished, Phoenix made his choice. Frey, whatever it costs me, I'm getting you out of here alive. They had crossed into uncharted territory now. There was no telling what horrors the future would bring. Phoenix would not allow a talent like Frey to die here. He could be humanity's only hope. And so, fulfilling his duty as a teacher one more time, Phoenix cast aside his own life, choosing to fight to the death, holding back these filthy demons until his last breath. Drawing a deep, ominous roar from within his chest, he thrust both hands forward toward Baelith, gathering every ounce of his remaining power. Eternal Flame, Dragon's Breath Barrage. Shock flashed across Baelith's face for a fraction of a second before the inferno consumed him, a searing beam of fire carving a path of blackened ash in its wake. Blasting Baelith away, Phoenix forged a massive spear of fire and hurled it straight at Beatrice, targeting her as the greater threat. But Baelith reappeared instantly in the path of the attack, knocking it aside. Your opponent is still here. Since when do you get to change dance partners so easily? Darkness coiled tightly around Baelith's fist as he launched himself at Phoenix, leaving a trail of shadow in his wake. Their collision sent both hurtling away, the momentum tearing the ground apart beneath them. Phoenix took the brunt of the impact. It felt less like being struck by a demon, and more like being hit by a meteor large enough to crush his entire body. Baelith was a tank in his own right, just like him. But the gap in raw physical ability between them was massive. Not to mention Beatrice. Phoenix had been struggling desperately just to hold his ground against Baelith alone, leaving him no chance to attack anyone else. As for Mikar, he wasn't faring any better. With his blazing spear, He parried Murgo's katana, while his free arm formed a spear of lightning to meet Gavid Lindman head-on. "You shouldn't have rushed here, Mikar Valyrian," Murgo said, unleashing dozens of hidden strikes through the ability of his Ashigatana, all while coordinating perfectly with Gavid Lindman. "You're fighting a meaningless, hopeless war against an enemy you know nothing about. And here you are, completely surrounded by two opponents weaker than you." Despite the heavy toll Fry Starlight had inflicted on them, the Ultra's side could still fight. The vitality of those who had reached SS Plus rank was not so easily spent. "This cursed land will serve as your grave, Emperor," Gavid Lindman declared, channeling his black hole technique to make his blade sharper than ever. He aimed to strike Mikar from a blind spot while the Emperor was preoccupied with Murgo. But the Emperor of Mankind blocked it effortlessly with a quick motion of his spear. With a roaring blaze fused with the power of lightning, Mikar blew both of them back, shattering the trap they had set. "My grave? Do you think the likes of you could kill me?" With each word, Mikar's aura swelled, building toward an eruption. Chapter 534. Rage Beyond SS Plus 2. "I've been holding back, saving my strength to deal with that damned witch hiding behind you. But I see now this plan will get me nowhere." The deadliest enemy on this battlefield was none other than Beatrice. As long as the witch remained, ignoring her was courting disaster. A lesson Mikar had learned the hard way in their last fight, when he fell into her magical trap. That was why, even while battling both Murgo and Gavid, Mikar's eyes never once left the witch. Lightning formation. Plasma burst. From within Mikar's body, electricity poured out in relentless torrents, compressing it by force until the vast ocean of current was packed into a sphere no larger than his fist. The Emperor moved with terrifying speed. Holding that sphere, he flicked it with his fingers, and it shot straight toward Murgo and Gavid. Both of them raced against time to evade it, but the baseball-sized projectile swelled into a monstrous sun in the blink of an eye, then exploded right in their faces. The scene was apocalyptic. A colossal sphere of lightning engulfed the battlefield, devouring everything in its path. Murgo instantly teleported away to escape its reach, while Gavid survived only thanks to his phantom form. Even so, their evasion left an opening. One Mikar exploited without hesitation. In a flash, he was above Beatrice, the sunfire spear poised to strike her head. The Emperor didn't hold back. He poured everything into that one blow, determined to erase the cursed witch who had tormented them for so long. To deal with her amidst so many enemies, speed was the only solution. That was Mikar's gamble. Phoenix, despite his strength, couldn't break past his foe. But the Emperor could blitz past Murgo and Gavid in an instant, and so he finally reached the witch. Before her, he unleashed the full might of his spear, a weapon said to rival the sun itself, seeking to crush her utterly. "Annihilate! Sunfire!" Mikar roared, unleashing the spear's wrath. In the next heartbeat, a deafening explosion shattered the air, shaking even the void itself. Mikar felt his spear strike something, but the strange sound of shattering glass by his ear made him freeze. From nowhere, countless unseen serpents crawled over his armor, while something invisible began crushing his body with unstoppable force. As for Beatrice, the woman he thought he'd struck, she was still standing before him, untouched. The witch turned her head slowly toward him, her deep violet eyes locking onto his. "I've been waiting for you, dear Mikar Valyrian." Drawing her staff, she prepared to cast. Mikar, however, was bound in place by the unseen force, strong enough to hold him for at least a few seconds. Humans are far simpler than they appear, blinded by their emotions, letting their grudges lead them like mindless beasts. "You hate me, don't you, Emperor of Mankind?" Beatrice laughed softly, her body glowing with an ominous crimson light. "I suppose what I did to you enraged you. That's why I was certain you'd attack me first, and all I had to do was set the trap." The binding spell she had placed on him was the strongest in her arsenal. More than enough to deal with SS Plus opponents. But it was only the prelude to what was coming. Mikar Valyrian, Do you know why I've only been using my weakest, most trivial spells against you so far? At that question, both Mikar's and Phoenix's expressions darkened as they felt what was about to come. The answer is simple. Because I've been preparing this spell in secret. With a laugh as deranged as it was fitting, Beatrice unleashed her attack. Kill him for me. At her command, for Death Kings materialized from the void, their overwhelming presence pressing down like a collapsing sky. Each stood over 100 meters tall, and together they encircled Mikar Valyrian, their massive shadows swallowing him whole. Gripping their colossal swords, the four kings swung without mercy, seeking to cleave the Emperor of Mankind apart. Dodge it! Phoenix roared, still locked in his own battle against Baelith. Taking such a direct hit would have been catastrophic for Mikar. Yet he couldn't break free from the binding spell Beatrice had placed on him. It held him for only a few seconds, but a few seconds were all Beatrice needed. It took me a while to finish this spell after that beast drained me, she said with a sly smile. But the end result isn't bad at all. Don't you agree? The moment she finished speaking, a deafening explosion shook the world. The swords of the four kings came crashing down, swallowing Mikar's body, and everything beneath him, whole. Their blades sank deep into the earth, shattering it, and once again that cursed continent wailed under the horrors of the war it had been forced to cradle. Even with the protection of the Fume Knight's armor, taking such a blow was bound to inflict massive damage on the Emperor, and Beatrice had planned it with care. The sight of the bloodied Emperor would have been a long-awaited delight to her eyes after all that had happened. But the scene she had anticipated never came. At the very last instant, Mikar Valyrian avoided the strike by the width of a hair. No, he hadn't avoided it. He had been saved. Carrying Mikar in one hand, an old man appeared far beyond the reach of the attack, his body radiating a brilliant light that cut through the night's darkness. With an annoyed sigh, he tossed the stunned Emperor aside and stepped forward, gripping two shining swords. My bones ache. My body's grown frail. I can no longer keep up with the younger generation, he muttered, voice edged with fatigue. Never in my life did I imagine I'd be the last to arrive. At his sudden appearance, Beatrice clicked her tongue in irritation. Sir Alone Valyrian, the Iron Emperor had finally entered the battle, hoping to at least tilt the balance. That damned old man is fast enough to slip past my senses. Beatrice cursed inwardly, readying herself to fight an opponent said to strike at the speed of light. Father? Mikar muttered, unable to believe that the old man had just saved him. But the Iron Emperor spared him not even a glance. Stop disgracing yourself. And me, get ready to fight. Releasing his full power, a terrifying surge of light aura burst from him, the Iron Emperor targeting Beatrice without hesitation. The enemy's leaders are right in front of us. If we win here, the Ultras are finished. Unleashing a concentrated wave of light, Sir Alone illuminated the entire battlefield. Fry Starlight has already slain the human devil, Dragoth. The enemy is at its weakest. So fight. Do not hold back. Attack with everything you have. This war ends today. His words stoked the flames in both Mikar and Phoenix, urging them to fight to their last breath. Neither of them knew the truth behind Dragoth's death at Frey's hands, but that news only deepened their resolve to crush what remained of their foes. The battle shifted 4 against 3, but their enemies were already wounded. In other words, the odds were nearly even. With that fact in mind, the Empire's side fought with every ounce of strength they had left, turning the fight into a struggle of life and death. 7 SS plus rank combatants clashed, unleashing a natural disaster that made the earth weep without pause. The sheer volume of aura they poured out bordered on madness. Depending on the outcome, this battle could very well end the war today. All the greatest powers of both sides were here, knowing that both sides played their final cards, aiming to erase each other from existence. History would remember it as one of the fiercest battles ever fought on Earth. Chapter 535. Runes of 20-fold Wrath 1. On its fringes, a single young man lay, his body propped against a jagged shard of debris left by the carnage. After Phoenix Sunlight had thrown him far from the fighting, Fry Starlight had remained motionless for a long time, unconscious in the wake of his earlier frenzy. But that stillness did not last. Despite everything he had endured, the pain, the bloodshed, the brutal battles, his eyes opened once more from behind the black mask. Fry Starlight's POV. Ah, what curse has befallen me now? The moment I returned to reality, a violent wave of searing pain tore through me. It was as if every wound I had sustained until now had been waiting for this exact moment to hit me all at once. It felt like my mind would burst from the sheer flood of nerve signals my body was sending. I couldn't move a single muscle. My body felt as if it had lost every bone, like I was nothing more than a pile of flesh and skin. What happened to me? I muttered in confusion. It took only seconds before I noticed the cursed battle raging nearby. I recognized many of the powerful auras clashing there, and slowly, my memory of what happened before I blacked out began to return. I can't believe I lost control of myself. Forcing myself through the pain, I dragged my body until I could lean against the trunk of a dead tree, unknowingly placing myself in direct view of the battlefield. The last thing I remembered was trying to test my strength against Dragoth. Then, everything flipped upside down, and I found myself transformed into a mindless killing machine, attacking everything in my path. That loss of control wasn't an accident. Yes, my mind was unstable, but breaking me required far more than that. It felt as though my body had betrayed me. Instinctively, I pulled back my tattered clothes, exposing bare skin to assess my current condition. The wounds and injuries had healed at a visibly accelerated rate thanks to my regeneration ability. But alongside the blood, another color crept beneath my skin, a deep, pitch-black hue, something unnatural that had taken root within me. Weskir's shadow. That cursed thing was the direct cause of what happened earlier. It was the reason I had lost control of myself in such a pitiful manner. I found myself cursing under my breath. If I keep losing control of myself and my power like this, it's only a matter of time before it ends in disaster. My current state was the perfect example. I couldn't put this off any longer. I have to deal with it as soon as possible. But before that, there was another pressing matter in front of me. The war was still raging on, and a brutal clash that could decide its outcome was unfolding right before my eyes. 4 against 3. It was far too close to call. In this condition, there's no way I can support them. Fighting was out of the question. I could barely lift a hand at this point. So instead, I opened my system interface, activating the third-person player's perspective. I'd been so fixated on what was happening in front of me that I'd forgotten about the ones I'd left behind. Somewhere far from my current position, tens of kilometers away, another battle had erupted, one that brought with it its own flood of death and destruction. Diving into the third-person view, my consciousness drifted away, peeling back the fog of war to reveal the true state of the battlefield. Far from the slaughter between the SS Plus class monsters, in the rearguard, a completely different kind of battle was unfolding. Through the blood-soaked mist that blanketed everything, the Imperial soldiers stumbled blindly, unable to locate their enemy, let alone engage them. They had held their ground well at first. Snow Lionheart had managed to clash evenly with the Nightmare Lord, the Cosmos. As for the accursed Ludwig, they had dealt with him, somehow by uniting their forces and trapping him. But just when the Imperial troops thought they had a chance, the mist surged back once more. And this time, dozens of horrors from hell itself crept forth, threatening to swallow them whole. No one knew where that swarm of mist stalkers had come from, slipping like phantoms into the battlefield. There were dozens of them, each one projecting a powerful illusion that ensnared almost everyone in its grip. The mist stalkers' haze, mixed with that of the cosmos, it was a blend that condemned hundreds of soldiers to an eternal nightmare from which they would never awaken. Among the Imperial ranks, a lone blue-haired girl staggered through the chaos, everyone around her already fallen victim to the illusion. Clutching a jagged, sharp rock, she trembled violently before stabbing it into her own flesh. using the pain to tear away the suffocating fog that threatened to strip her consciousness away. In that way, Celine barely managed to stay awake, remembering Fry Starlight's warning about the mist stalkers from before. Close your eyes and make pain your refuge. It was the only way to survive the stalker's illusions. But in the heart of this hell, Celine couldn't help but wonder, what could she possibly do, blind and bleeding by her own hand? No matter how she turned it over in her mind, despair was all that filled her. And in that moment of doubt, she made a grave mistake. She opened her eyes, and there it was, looming right before her. A foul, hideous thing with a twisted face and an elongated body shrouded in a black robe. One of the very mist stalkers they used to frighten children in the old horror tales. Its maw stretched open, fangs jagged and dripping, as it prepared to swallow her whole. Celine froze in place, unable to move a muscle. She was about to die, but she refused to believe it. I won't die. He showed me the future. Trying to convince herself, she repeated the words over and over. She had seen a future where she stood beside him. But the stalker's gaping mouth had already closed in, ready to crush her body in a single bite. With death mere inches away, Celine's will cracked for a heartbeat, surrendering her belief to the primal fear of dying. But the end she feared never came. At the last second, a massive beam of azure aura slammed into the stalker, blasting it away. The nightmare creature tumbled across the ground, howling in fury as it tried to regain its footing, only for a colossal block of ice to crash down from the heavens, burying it completely. A moment later, bolts of lightning and pillars of fire rained from nowhere, obliterating both the ice and the nightmare beneath it. Celine was left stunned by the sheer destructive force on display, until a voice she'd never heard before snapped her back to reality. Chapter 536. Runes of 20-fold Wrath 2. Are you all right? A young man with black hair and crimson eyes extended his hand to her. Dawn Polaris, the one who hadn't sustained so much as a scratch since the battle began. But the real focus wasn't on Dawn. He wasn't the one who had unleashed that devastating display. It was the woman standing just behind him. Damn these filthy creatures. How many of them do I have to kill before this nightmare ends? She looked genuinely annoyed. A strange witch moving through the battlefield. A strange aura coiling around her along with several crackling sparks of electricity. What stood out wasn't just her power, but the strange runic symbols glowing across scattered parts of her body. We have to move quickly before the mist gets to us, said Dawn Polaris, mindful of the injured Celine. As for the witch, Selena Hemsworth, she didn't even seem to acknowledge her presence. All she wanted to do was move faster. At once, the three of them ran, cutting through one battlefield after another. Each time, Selena would annihilate any nightmare creature that dared cross their path. Her body released magic instinctively, weaving every element at a level that was both high and incomprehensible. Her aura had reached heights it was never meant to touch. She was shrouded in complete mystery. Yet she handled dozens of mist-born abominations on her own. The fog seemed to have no effect on her, and Celine suspected it had something to do with the strange runes carved into her body. They were scattered across her arms, legs, torso, even her neck and face. It was as if glowing tattoos had been etched onto her with cursed ink. Among the incomprehensible runes, there was one thing Celine could read, and so could anyone else who saw it. On Selena's right side, just above her waist, a certain number was carved. Times 20. What did that mean? Times 20? That's what Celine wanted to know. Especially after Selena unleashed more and more devastating attacks, slaying the Mistborn at alarming speed. Next! Damn it! The witch barked angrily, dashing about with Dawn and Celine following behind. Then, without warning, Selena's body convulsed, and she coughed blood before collapsing onto the ground. Dawn rushed to her side instantly, supporting her. That's enough, Selena. Your body can't take any more, he said urgently, only for the witch to shove him away in irritation. And what do you know about my limits? Sitting on the ground, she groaned from the sheer pain she had to endure. I might have overdone it this time, Shouldn't have pushed it to 20 times my power. Slowly, Selena exhaled as the runes faded from her skin. Hearing that, Celine could no longer suppress her curiosity. 20 times. Your power. Selena didn't even seem aware of the girl's presence until now, her expression twisting in annoyance. Who's this girl with the dumb face? She's the one you saved earlier, don't you remember? Dawn replied, earning a sigh from Selena. My focus was on the nightmare creatures. Looks like you had the time to pick up girls. Huh. Dawn. Selena grumbled, right before coughing up more blood, prompting Dawn to palm his face. We need to move soon. If we stay here, they'll surround us. Dawn pointed out, but Selena only chuckled at that. With you here, I doubt anything could happen to us, even if the Demon King himself came down. Clearly, she was referring to her comrade's bizarre survival ability. Not to mention, I'll be vomiting more blood the moment I try to move. She had clearly reached her limit. Trapped in the heart of the battlefield, their only option was to rely on Dawn's luck to keep the danger at bay. The fighting raged on, and no doubt Snow was still clashing with Cosmos. They could still feel the colossal fluctuations of aura from their duel. Selena wanted to help, but her limit had come faster than expected. At that moment, Celine hesitantly raised her hand. Excuse me, I think I can help. Hearing that, Selena's doubt was evident. Help? How? Are you going to cry at the enemy until they feel sorry for us? Be kinder to her, Selena, Dawn interjected, urging Celine to ignore the jab. Celine summoned her power, and water began to form out of thin air around her. I can heal you enough to fight again, she said, making both Dawn and Selena look at her in a new light. That changes everything. In that case, come here and help your big sis, Selena said enthusiastically, while Dawn frowned. She doesn't look that much younger than us. Shut your mouth. Celine just stared at them, baffled at how they could banter like this in the middle of such chaos. Where did they get this level of nonchalance? She wanted to know. But for Dawn, who knew his ability would protect him no matter what, and for Selena, who had witnessed that ability with her own eyes, staying calm beside him was natural. Come here, girl, and start healing. Ah, right. Celine rushed over, placing her hands on Selena's back, letting her power flow into her. My ability lets me turn the water I control into healing water. I can treat your internal injuries this way, but I can't restore your aura reserves, Celine explained. No need for that. Healing my internal damage is more than enough, Selena replied with a laugh. At first, Celine didn't understand what she meant, until she began healing and realized just how battered Selena's body truly was. The number of internal injuries was insane. Don't be shocked, girl. This mess is the price of my ability, Selena said with a smile. Since you told me about your healing, I'll tell you about mine. Forming a magic pen in her hand, she began writing over her skin. As you can see, I can grant myself different powers by inscribing runes onto my body. I can use this ability in many ways, like instantly casting spells or manipulating elements I normally couldn't use, Selena explained before her grin deepened. Or multiplying my power several times over. The last sentence caught Celine's full attention. She instantly remembered that times 20 mark. Does that mean? Selena nodded. That's right. 20 is my limit, but I can multiply my power 20-fold. That's how I was able to slaughter all those nightmare creatures. That's incredible, Celine gasped, unable to hide her awe. Selena laughed proudly in response. Yes, it is. Fry Starlight wasn't the only one who had honed himself through relentless training. One of the story's main heroines, Selena Hemsworth, had also awakened her true potential. Chapter 537. Snow Lionheart vs. Cosmos, 1. The battlefield had descended into utter chaos, swallowed by a thick, all-consuming fog. Nightmare creatures attacked without pause, and the Empire's side was the sole loser in this exchange. While soldiers fell one after another, dropping like flies, the Ultras had done nothing but unleash the nightmare beasts upon them. In other words, Despite the oceans of blood spilled and the savagery of the clash, the Ultras had not lost a single life in the most recent engagement. The Empire's situation was dire, and the miasma of the Ghasts, fused with the power of the cosmos, only made things worse. Unity was no longer an option. Everyone was fighting their own desperate battle somewhere inside that fog. Among them, Snow Lionheart's fight was surely the most grueling of all. He was forced to face the Nightmare Lord directly while fending off countless other abominations. The Cosmos fighting style was unlike anything he'd ever seen, appearing one moment, vanishing the next, like some kind of phantom. A mere touch from it was enough to melt human flesh to nothing, leaving behind nothing but bone. Snow Lionheart was suffering heavily against such a maddening foe. He unleashed the War King form without restraint, bringing forth his entire arsenal of elemental might. Harnessing black lightning in great quantities, Snow lunged at the cosmos, sending a furious bolt crashing toward the beast. But the devastating strike simply passed through its body, which vanished in a strange blur, only to reappear behind him without warning. The cosmos lashed out with hundreds of long, whip-like arms, trying to crush his body. Snow barely evaded the blow by using Void Step, a skill that allowed him to erase the space between them in the blink of an eye. Using that momentum, he tried to smother the cosmos in a massive flood of azure fire. Rabid, raging flames erupting from both his sword and his body in such volume that they should have consumed the creature completely. Yet once again, the attack simply passed harmlessly through the Nightmare Beast's body before it faded like a ghost and struck from behind. Snow kept evading by the skin of his teeth, but no matter what he tried, he couldn't lay a finger on the cosmos. The battle became a game of chase, an endless loop where Snow's most powerful strikes phased through the cosmos, and in turn, the cosmos' relentless counterstrikes were narrowly dodged with Void Step. It repeated so many times that they were trapped in a meaningless cycle. Snow was beginning to lose his composure. This will turn into a battle of attrition. Engaging in this kind of fight was never to his advantage. Unlike him, who was burning vast amounts of aura with every grand display of power, the cosmos used nothing but its long limbs and that absurd ghost-like body. Its ability, it's similar to that of Gavid Lindman, Lord of the Ultras. But unlike him, there are no weaknesses in the cosmos case. The phantom form was indeed a formidable power, but it came with flaws. For Gavid, if he neither saw nor sensed the attack, he couldn't phase his body to avoid it. But with the cosmos, no matter how fast Snow struck, no matter how many blind angles he attacked from, he simply couldn't touch it. Worse still, other nightmare beasts kept interfering in their fight, forcing him to split his awareness across multiple fronts. Where the hell are all these cursed creatures coming from? Unleashing 3 elements at once: fire, lightning, and gravity. Snow became a natural disaster incarnate, annihilating anything foolish enough to approach him. Yet despite holding his ground so far, his light was beginning to fade. For all his lethal powers and the War King form pushing him to his peak, his aura reserves were modest compared to his enemies. Vermithor had been feeding him a massive supply of energy, but even that wouldn't let him fight forever. The longer the battle dragged on, the tighter the noose around Snow became. The cosmos isn't affected by anything I throw at it. The nightmare creatures just keep coming from that fog without end, and I can't tell what's happening inside its range. The unnatural force within the fog had completely crippled his senses. He had no way of knowing how his allies were faring. He was especially worried about the Hollow, Ludwig, Ghost Umbra, and several S-rank fighters had taken on the task of stopping him. But the fog had cut them off entirely, leaving Snow blind to their struggle. Ludwig was an SS-rank combatant with completely unknown abilities. In other words, there was no guarantee Ghost and the others could hold him back. And then there was the sheer scale of the bloodshed, the corpses piling up in every direction thanks to the nightmare assault. Little by little, under the War King form's side effects, Snow was losing his balance, realizing that every soldier who had followed him here might well be annihilated. Gripping his sword tightly, he bared his teeth in fury and charged at the cosmos with even greater speed. "You're telling me I'm still powerless to change anything, Even after all these years? Shrouding himself in starlight aura, Snow chased the cosmos with a relentless flurry of light slashes. The ferocity of his assault severed the Nightmare Lord's limbs with ease, yet he still couldn't touch its true body. With no other choice, he pushed himself harder, trying to finally reach it. Nightmare creatures closed in to trap him again, but anything that entered his range was reduced to dust. Calling upon 6 elements at once, Snow Lionheart pushed himself beyond his limits. The fog worked its sinister magic, hallucinations gnawing at his mind. That curtain of smoke had hidden the fates of every soldier who had followed him blindly, and now he was beginning to picture the scene. The fog lifting, revealing nothing behind him but corpses, blood, and death. From the start of this battle, nothing had emerged from that fog but monsters. Not a single human had appeared, only nightmare creatures whose numbers did not diminish, but instead continued to grow. Am I truly this weak? So powerless that I can't change a thing, even with all the talents and blessings granted to me. His blessed body, the overwhelming talents and abilities that had placed him above his peers. He had been born with gifts no other human before him had possessed. Yet even so, Snow Lionheart was still losing miserably in the face of his very first true challenge. The hallucinations intensified to the point where he began to see old, buried memories resurfacing within his heart. As he dashed across the battlefield, striking down anything that dared approach, he would, from time to time, catch glimpses of children running around him, only for flames to ignite and consume them one after another. From afar, he saw their silhouettes. An entire group of children standing behind a single man, hiding behind his back, all casting upon Snow every shade of disdain. Especially that cursed director, the monster who had left a scar on Snow's life. Snow knew well that this was nothing more than an illusion conjured by his enemy, but he could not stop the boiling fury inside him, for what he was facing now was nothing less than a brutal reminder of his own weakness. Chapter 538. Snow Lionheart vs. Cosmos 2. If it were him, he wouldn't have struggled for even a minute against an opponent like this. Surrounded on all sides, the Vermithor's sword blazed without pause, its glow like a cry for help, as its wielder found himself in a hopeless situation. Snow, his face smeared with blood and his golden eyes dimmed, fixed his gaze far ahead, at the cosmos, the creature weaving its web around him. If Fry Starlight were here, none of this would be happening. Once, there had been a time when Fry was far beneath him. In the blink of an eye, he had caught up, becoming his equal. Snow had been content with that, but without realizing it, Fry had advanced far ahead, leaving him behind. Snow Lionheart had never slacked, not once, and had trained just as hard as Fry. Yet, for some reason, the one beloved by light could no longer advance, no matter how he tried, as if he had slammed into some invisible wall keeping him from catching up to his peers. He had everything it took to become the strongest. His talent was the highest among all humans. Every resource had been placed at his disposal, every path prepared and paved for him. He was the one beloved by the heavens. And yet, I'm still powerless to do anything, Snow roared, releasing every ounce of pent-up frustration he had carried until now. Since the start of this war, no, since the day I was born, I haven't achieved a damn thing. The chosen hero meant to lead all of humanity, the blessed, the chosen, the titles piled up, endless in number. But what had this hero actually achieved? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Whether it was in the distant past, when he was just a boy watching his home burn to the ground and everyone around him die, or now when he had become the so-called hero, he hadn't defeated his enemies. He hadn't saved his comrades. Every obstacle he met, he lost. He lost to V. He lost to Fry. He lost in Launder. He couldn't win his battle in the chase, and would have died if not for Lara's intervention. Loss after loss. Loss after loss. Slash after slash. Strike after strike. Snow tried to shatter the invisible chains wrapped around his body. Lose and lose. And here I am losing again. Burning with hatred for his situation and his weakness, The church's champion fought with reckless ferocity, caring nothing for what might happen to him. I don't want to lose anymore. I don't want to sit on the sidelines, powerless to change a damn thing. The chains around Snow tightened further, trying to crush him. But he kept pushing, kept straining, desperate to break free. He bit his lip hard enough to spill blood down his chin, turning the pain and the heat of battle into something that jolted him awake from his illusions. He didn't know why he was still stuck, nor could he find any way to break his restraints. But he refused to fall, even if it meant using only whatever he had at hand right now. My current strength is more than enough to deal with the likes of you. Maintaining his war king form, the golden runes across Snow's body flared brightly as he leapt high into the sky, away from the poisonous mists below. Focus! Sweeping his gaze across the battlefield from above, Snow searched for any method to fight this untouchable creature. Even after climbing that high, the fog never once allowed him to check on his allies. All he could see in the distance were dozens of lights of varying colors, auras and elements flashing, proof that the fighting still raged on. But Snow paid no attention to the others now. His eyes were locked entirely on the cosmos. There's no such thing as a perfect ability in this world. No matter how powerful or flawless an ability might seem, there had to be at least one weakness. Snow bet everything he had on finding it. The runes across his body shone even brighter, and his eyes burned as he forced them to their absolute limits. For a moment, it was as though the world Snow saw through those eyes was completely different from what other humans could perceive. His vision expanded greatly, until there was nothing left in his awareness but the auras around him. His mind erased the existence of everything else. There was only him and the cosmos upon this earth. As his body fell from the sky, the cosmos seized the opportunity, sending its long arms shooting upward, aiming to crush him before he could land. Yet Snow showed no sign of moving, even when faced with such a direct, lethal attack. He simply kept staring, as if possessed by some phantom, his gaze fixed in madness, to the point where a thin line of drool slipped unconsciously from the corner of his mouth. That unblinking focus let him see what no one else could. He saw another world, one that revealed the truth of his opponent at last. So that's your secret, you filthy creature. A terrifying grin split Snow Lionheart's face as he raised his sword high, his entire body blazing with light. Great cosmos formation. Obeying his command, 12 elements swirled around his body, fusing together into a single cataclysmic detonation. A nuclear-scale explosion that struck the cosmos and erased every nightmare creature from existence. The colossal pillar of light his attack unleashed shook the entire battlefield to its foundations. Yet even an assault of that magnitude failed to leave the cosmos so much as scratched. Even so, Snow did not flinch. The moment his feet touched the ground, his body flashed faintly, and black lightning serpents coiled around him. Using Void Step, he vanished from his position, surging away from the battlefield and leaving the cosmos behind. It looked like he was retreating, surrendering to his foe. But the shrill, cursed cry that erupted from the cosmos was all the proof anyone needed that this was not the case. It charged after him at once, the ground quaking beneath the pounding of its countless legs. But no matter how it tried, it could not match Snow's speed. He had already crossed an immense distance in the blink of an eye. With a grim smile, he drew every ounce of power his sword could muster, preparing to end their struggle once and for all. So that's why you've been hiding in the fog all along, you damned beast. Unlike the fog conjured by the mist stalkers, the cosmos mist didn't produce illusions, it dulled the senses. The hallucination Snow had suffered earlier had only been the result of numerous mist stalkers mixing their power with the cosmos' own. In other words, the cosmos itself did nothing more than numb its enemy's perception. It seemed like a useless ability at first, but Snow had finally uncovered the truth behind it. That fog is nothing but a cover to hide your real secret. That grotesque form of yours is nothing but a decoy. Your true body is somewhere else entirely. Snow had spotted it before, the thin thread of aura linking the cosmos body to a distant location. A location very far away. But thanks to his enhanced vision, he had seen it clearly. Just one glance had given him the answer to every question. That's why I couldn't land a hit on you no matter what I tried. The body he'd been fighting all this time was nothing but a substitute. A puppet controlled by the real one. Using Void Step, Snow ripped through the distance, and in mere seconds found himself face to face with the true deal. So this is where you've been hiding all along, you cowardly nightmare. Chapter 539, Crimson Chains of the Father. Snow roared, striking without hesitation. For the first time in history, a human had laid eyes on the cosmos' true form. In stark contrast to its towering, monstrous shell, the real cosmos was eerily human-like, barely 2 meters tall, with a twisted frame and unnaturally long limbs. It looked almost ordinary. Its long hair fell over its face, but Snow could still make out the raw fear carved into its features. The cosmos instantly tried to flee, its body flaring with chaotic aura in an attempt to drive him back. But Snow dodged with ease, coating his blade in the last reserves of his aura. One sword style, supreme art, concentrating every element and every scrap of his strength. Snow's body vanished for a heartbeat, and time itself seemed to halt. When he reappeared, he was already behind the cosmos. For an instant, it seemed as though he hadn't done anything, and the cosmos believed that lie. But without warning, the world before it inverted, and its upper half slid away from the rest of its body, collapsing to the dirt.
Silent Rend.
A single strike that transcended time itself, tearing apart everything in its path in the span of a heartbeat. Snow had cleaved the cosmos clean in two, its upper body toppling from the rest, staining the ground beneath. It began to scream at once, howling in manic, grief-stricken wails, but Snow appeared before it in a flash, driving his sword into its mouth and forcing it into submission. Your real body is far weaker than your former shell. No wonder you hid it in the fog. So no one would ever know just how pathetic you truly are. It was said that the cosmos was one of the nightmare lords of the SS Plus rank. But in truth, that was a lie. The reality was far less impressive. It was merely a nightmare creature that had been gifted an SS Plus class ability. Its actual self was pitiful, but almost impossible to find. No one had ever defeated it before. Its other form could not be touched, and so the world had trembled at its name for years unchallenged. I lost, and lost, and lost again, Snow murmured, exhaling at last. But today, I won. Gathering what little strength remained, the hero of humanity prepared to end the wretched nightmare once and for all. When his enhanced senses screamed a warning from nowhere, forcing him to whirl around toward another monster targeting his neck. They were far from the battlefield now. Which was why Snow had never expected the accursed Ludwig to appear before him, swinging his massive scythe straight at his throat. With no time to spare, Snow was forced to redirect his blade, pulling it away from the cosmos at the last instant to intercept Ludwig's scythe. Steel met steel with a deafening clash, Snow barely deflecting the weapon so that it whooshed past his head by a hair's breadth. He immediately stepped back, ready to re-engage. But to his surprise, Ludwig didn't even bother to attack him again. Instead, the hollow scooped up half of his mother's remains and bolted away without a word. It seemed he'd heard her final wail and rushed here, abandoning everything else. Snow's mind swirled with questions at the hollow's sudden appearance. Does this mean Ghost and the others? The thought chilled him to the bone, but he forced it aside. Summoning what strength he had left, Snow lunged after the fleeing hollow. You're not going anywhere. Ludwig wasn't in his best shape. Beneath his plague-black garb, blood poured freely, proof that his previous battle had been far from easy. This was the perfect chance to kill him. Snow sought to crush him in a single, overwhelming strike. But the instant he tried to unleash the warlord form again, a ripping agony tore through his entire body. That brief hesitation was all Ludwig needed. He vanished from sight, using some unknown skill that rendered Snow completely unable to track him. Damn it! Have I already reached my limit? Now, the warlord form was nothing but a living hell, Every extra second in it threatened to shred his very soul. Still, Snow endured, relying on his enhanced senses to search for Ludwig. But it was useless. The hollow was gone, taking the last remnants of his mother's body with him. As for the cosmos, Snow had left it on the brink of death, but he hadn't dealt the killing blow. Whether it would live or die, he had no answer, and that uncertainty burned him with frustration. They all run from me in the end. Haha, what a pathetic sight I am. Snow's words dripped with bitter self-mockery, but he didn't stand idle. Gripping Vermithor's blade, he channeled holy power into his battered body and began dragging himself back toward the battlefield where his allies fought. The battle's not over yet. I have to return. But despite his words, his pace was sluggish, reduced to nothing more than a walk. From the very start, he had fought against the cosmos' impenetrable form and the nightmare army for hours, draining himself to the brink. Now, his only hope of returning to fighting condition lay in Vermithor's healing power, praying it would restore him enough to fight again. I wonder what happened to the others. Ghost? Dawn? Selena? All of them. I doubt anything could take Dawn down, but the others? Ghost? Snow drew in a sharp breath, forcing himself onward. I have to go back. I have to help them. Step by step, he closed the distance. He wanted to give more. What he had achieved so far was nowhere near enough. He wanted to prove something both to himself and to everyone else. He pushed harder. He wanted to shed his weakness, to change his fate. He didn't want to be cast aside. He wanted to stand at the very front, right where he was meant to be, there where people like Fry Starlight stood. Snow no longer wished to linger in the shadows. A blazing fire had ignited in his chest, fueled every time he'd been thrown aside. He had never understood this feeling, only that it was far from pleasant. It hurt him every single time. Chains still coiled around him like snakes, and he had yet to find the key to break them. But until he did, he had no choice but to keep moving forward. Even knowing full well you're nothing but a filthy, deformed monster, you still try to play the hero. The voice came like a devil's whisper in his ear. Snow froze mid-step, shock and hatred twisting his face. Slowly, with eyes wide open, he turned. And there he was. Tell me, runaway son, do you see yourself as a hero? From nothing, the man appeared, walking toward him at a measured pace. A well-built figure, with long reddish hair and tanned skin, reading glasses balanced on one side over his right eye, and the same simple, fatherly clothes as always. In that unexpected moment, Snow came face to face with the man he had searched for so long. He was certain this was no hallucination, not another illusion born of the fog. The man before him was real, real enough to look exactly as Snow remembered him from his childhood. The orphanage director, the man responsible for the Yosefka tragedy. The Hollow. Smuff. Chapter 540. Possession. It's been a long time since I last saw you, my boy. I let you wander and grow, until you became what you are now. But with those same golden eyes, I can see you haven't changed much. Smuffa's words reflected in Snow's mind as his body reacted on instinct. He unleashed the warlord form at full force, ignoring the agony, and lunged without hesitation, aiming straight for the man's neck. You haven't changed either, but you're no longer the obedient child I once knew. Clang. Without warning, a crushing wave of pain slammed into Snow Lionheart's mind, shaking him to the core. His sword bit into Smuffa's neck, but the man's body was so impossibly solid that the blade stopped halfway through, cutting only part of it. In turn, Smuffa's massive fist drove deep into Snow's chest, punching through until it burst out of his back. The child I raised would never have attacked me, but you're no longer that obedient boy. You've rebelled, my son, and it's time to come home. Clutching at Smoa's fist, Snow coughed up blood, swearing through the agony. Burn! To hell! From within Snow's body, more power surged into his sword as he tried to cleave Smoa's head off, but the latter remained unmoved by his struggle. Veins crawled across the hollow skin, his body hardening manyfold. You can't win. In your current state, you wouldn't be able to swat a mosquito. Pulling his hand from Snow's chest, Smuff left a gaping, bloody crater in his son's body. Snow writhed on the ground, screaming in pain. Vermithor was still lodged in Smoa's neck, irritating him. The hollow wrenched it free and tossed it aside. "Annoying sword," he muttered, wiping away the bleeding wound. That blade was a bane to those who wielded demonic power. His gaze returned to Snow, who was still writhing on the ground, trying to clutch the hole in his chest. No matter what he did, the wound refused to stop bleeding. Snow tried to rise, but Smoa's foot came down hard on his head, forcing him back into the dirt. "I don't want to mutilate you any more than this. Be a good boy and stay down, Snow. Be a good boy and everything will be fine." Those words were a curse in Snow's ears. He was racing against time, his mind spiraling into chaos. "Damn it, is all of this my blood?" He kept trying to press against the void in his chest, but all his hands found was more blood, far too much of it. He felt his consciousness slipping away. His sword was gone, his strength completely spent. It's fine. I'll be okay." He spat out more blood, sobbing beneath Smoa's boot. "I just need to circulate my aura. Just focus and the wound will heal on its own. I'll be fine. I'll be fine." Snow's breathing was ragged. Inhale, exhale, then a hacking cough splattering more blood around him. "I'll be fine." Breathing became a task in itself. Blood filled his throat entirely, and his vision began to dim. "I'll be fine." He kept repeating it blindly, unable to process that his blood had already pooled around him. "It's truly pitiful," Smuff said, a look of disgust twisting his face. "You think yourself a noble hero, pure and righteous, unlike me, the monster who devours humans. Isn't that so?" The hollow whispered into Snow's ear with a faint chuckle. "How naive you are, my son. You and I are no different at all." Dipping his hand into Snow's blood, he smeared it across the boy's face. "The same blood runs through your veins. I injected it into you myself. Demon's blood." Patting Snow's white hair, now stained crimson, Smo continued to pour his venom. "And not just demon blood, but the blood of all the other children who lived under the same roof as you." Those final words made Snow's head boil with rage, but he could do nothing. "Your body was always the most perfect. That's why I chose you as the ideal vessel for all that blood. So don't hold it against me, my son." Smuff laughed loudly, as Snow's consciousness slid into darkness. He couldn't speak in this state, but inside his mind he cursed. He cursed the man standing before him, and he cursed his own weakness, the weakness that had once again left him powerless to do anything. The man he'd searched for years to find was right in front of him, and he'd lost to him in a single blow. Pathetic. Truly, utterly pathetic. And so, Snow fell completely, defeated before the hollow Smo. The latter reached out to take him. "Seems you've finally fallen." The hollow had chosen to appear at the worst possible moment, after Snow had drained himself completely. He knew full well that if he'd fought Snow at his peak, no one could say how things might have turned out. That was why he struck when he did, and his plan had worked flawlessly. Now all that was left was to claim the body. But the moment his hand extended, the pressure around them shifted from nothingness into something crushing, and Snow Lionheart's eyes snapped open once again. The church's hero slapped Smoa's hand away, and with a flick of his wrist, Vermithor came flying back to him. Gripping it, Snow plunged the sword deep into his own chest, unleashing a brilliant radiance that engulfed the battlefield. With quick, deliberate steps, he retreated from Smo, who stared, baffled by what he was seeing. "You!" Smo barked as Snow smiled. "Ah, damn. That hurts more than I expected." With the sword still buried in his chest, Snow stood face to face with the hollow. "You really are a cursed bastard, Smuff. Attacking your enemies like this? Pathetic." Snow laughed, while Smuff's brow furrowed. The man before him had changed entirely, as if someone else. "Ah, you caught me." Smiling faintly, a ghostly image of another figure appeared behind Snow. Asterisk third-person POV. Target possessed, affinity insufficient, possession will be cancelled shortly, asterisk. Glaring at the system's notice, Snow gripped Vermithor tightly. I don't have much time, so let's finish this quickly. It was Fry Starlight, speaking through Snow's body, ready to face the enemy who had tormented his friend for far too long.